Welcome to our fall in service for Q. This is a much bigger group than we had the last time, so I'm excited. I think that we had 3 people last time, and I ended up talking a lot to myself, but I do that anyway. So regardless of psychiatric issues, um, we are going to have a little bit of interactivity this morning. So if you'd like to continue with this app, that's great. And then we'll move into some of the content areas with traditional slide decks in just a little bit. So go ahead and I'm just going to advance this and take this off here. And you got a next question for today. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself in a little bit, but check out this next question and give me an answer. Oh boy, we have some detractors of candy corn so far. Well, tomorrow is the first day of fall officially. And so today's presentation will have a fall theme. There might be a little bit of graphics involved. So overwhelmingly, it looks like most people do not enjoy candy corn, which is a very polarizing thing around Halloween, right? Either people tend to love it or hate it. Very few people are in the middle. Today's group, we don't like candy corn. But luckily for you, I kind of anticipated that. So for the folks in the room today, got some Halloween candy to pass around. Help yourself. For those in the virtual world, if you've got some candy at home, go ahead and join in with us today as we send this around. So Cindy, I'm going to start with you. Open her up and have a little bit of sugar. I apologize in advance if anyone can't have sugar or doesn't eat sugar, but there we go. That's for today to keep us a little bit alert, but not completely alert. Okay, that just wow. Oh, this is why we have to do warm-ups here. All right, so overall 1.3, 1.7. Yeah, we didn't get past a 2.7. That's fine. All right. Next question is a poll question too. I would like to know for EMD, which protocol version are you on at your center? If you don't know, say, I don't know. There is an option for no clue. Ten seconds on the clock, and don't forget to submit your answer. Okay. So we've got 5 for 14.0, 3 for 13.3, and we've got 2 that don't have a clue. That's fine. We are going to be talking a lot this morning about protocol version 14.0. It came out in April of last year, or this year, I should say, at the Navigator conference. And there are some very big changes coming for version 14. So if you haven't seen 14 or you're not comfortable with 14 yet, or don't know some of the whys behind some of the changes, today is going to help you answer those questions with a lens of quality assurance on everything that we talk about. Okay. All right. Next question. Here's the one for you. I would like to know for EFD, what version is your center using? And there's one of these that I'm really hoping nobody chooses, but I'm never surprised when I walk into a place and see software that's in need of a little bit of an update. Wow, we've got 7 RCCs on 7.1 of EFD. That is fantastic. I was anticipating more on the 7.0 side, so that's great. 2 don't have a clue. That's all right. We are not going to talk too much about EFD today because the priority is the medical side. In the next session, we'll dive into EFD a little bit more because we're expecting a very major update next month around Halloween for EFD. We're going to version 8, and there are some really cool things in version 8 that I just can't talk about yet, but they're very exciting. And so once that comes out, we'll actually have a dedicated EFD discussion where I will take you through everything that's new and explain why the changes are in there. We've got some new building types coming in. It's going to require a lot of setup on the back end with your fire service. So I'm very excited about that. All right. After last session, I feel like I'm getting better at strengths-based feedback. Well, if you weren't at the last session, I guess you could take a stab at it. The session before that, I also talked about strengths-based feedback. And so let's see where we have some people here. Give it 20 seconds, right? We talked about the power of words and meeting with our dispatchers to discuss improving the use of protocol and quality assurance standards. So it looks like we still have a bit of work to do. We've got a lot of people who are not at all feel like they're getting better at strengths-based feedback. So it looks like we have a little bit more work to do on that. I will keep that in the back of my mind. The last two sessions, I don't know if we still have access to the recordings from them. I gave a ton of examples of strengths-based feedback. We sent out a slide deck with strengths-based feedback examples in it. If you're like, what is he talking about? You need to get with Kyle and get those materials because we spent an enormous amount of time talking about how do we structure our comments, how do we find strengths even in a non-compliant case, right? Those are the things that we want all of our quality assurance folks to do a much better job on, and not just in Maine. Everywhere I go, I talk about strengths-based feedback. Today, we're going to take that actually a step farther for a little bit, and we're going to talk about the use of exemplaries on fire and medical calls. And we'll talk a little bit about some examples of how that should look. All right. Next one, I am now waiting for some players to join. We do have a short quiz. Again, you can pick a username and an avatar that you like. You can be creative, keep it professional or whimsical. And we've got maybe 10 or 12 questions just to get us ramped up. I've got Monique, got Medic Minded, I got Jess, Jenny. All right. By the way, it will assign you a random emoji icon if you don't go ahead and tell it what you want. And sometimes that icon is not ideal for your personality. So go ahead and change it. In the last session that I had, somebody got the poop emoji and didn't know why. It's random, just like Q is random. So, all right. Wow, I got at least 10 players. This is fantastic. We'll just give it a minute more and see if we can get some more on here. Just by show of hands, while we're waiting for some others to join, how many either attended or saw the recording from our session in the spring?
Not many, because we had problems with it. Some of these teams was not.
Okay. Do we still have that recording?
Somewhere.
Okay. So we should probably make that available if we have it still, if it's still retained from the last time.
Yeah, we were having problems just getting it, so it was available to people.
Okay.
It was something to do with teams.
Of course it is. Okay.
So if that becomes the same issue this time, that is instead, because that seems to be a better way to get to recording.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start the quiz. Are we ready? Set, go. Question 1 of 11. Why are freelance questions discouraged during protocol? Freelance questions discouraged. "25 seconds on the clock. It's still not too late to join. There is a link at the top of your screen. If you want to go and open up your web browser on your tablet or phone, Android or iPhone, you can still join and participate at any time. All right, so we had 10 Qs say that the answer is all of the above, and that is the correct answer, right? Freelance questions are discouraged because they do add time to call processing, they can delay reaching a send point, and they often lack relevance to the situation, right? What we're talking about freelance questions is things that are not in the protocol and things that your agency does not need to ask. right? If your agency has a directive that says in certain situations they need to ask something that's not in protocol, that's completely fine. That is agency specific. If they want you to go a little bit farther, right? A good example of that might be on a mental health or psychiatric call. If you find that there's something that protocol doesn't capture that you need, if you're okay with it, you can put out a directive. It says, we're going to ask these additional types of questions. That would not be freelance in that case because you have a local directive to support it. What we don't want, though, is emergency dispatchers to just be inventing questions that are not in the protocol because it can take away from the protocol. And in some of our larger agencies where you do dispatch at the send point, that can be highly problematic because it hasn't flipped the nature in CAD. And then a radio dispatcher may not be sending that call out as quickly as we would like. More of a problem in EFD on certain call types like structure fire, right? Where we want that immediate send point if we know we have smoke, flames, or fire in or coming from a building, right? So those are all of the reasons why freelances are discouraged. And I use the word discouraged intentionally because I'm not saying that they're prohibited. We have a standard that says don't ask freelance questions. But what I'm also telling you in the same breath is that really doesn't apply to things that are locally driven, right? And so that's important. All right, let's see who's on our leaderboard. We have Jess in the lead, followed by Medic Minded. And keep in mind, the faster you answer, even if you both select the correct answer, you'll get more points for speed. Next question, number 2. Our new philosophy in Q is that if something is not clearly wrong, for example, the Q should consider doing what? Q should consider doing what? Right. This comes off of our last 2 sessions as well, where we talked a lot about this theme. Five seconds to go. Time's up. All right. 10 out of 11 said give benefit of the doubt. That is the answer, right? Standards 10.1 now has an entire introduction on benefit of the doubt and reasonableness, right? And as Qs, our core responsibility, aside from reviewing the call and following the standards and the rules and the axioms, is to support our emergency dispatchers whenever we can. And this enables us now to not have to be like, oh, I got to go in and find 3 deviations on this person. No, let's try to celebrate those things that are done well. And those things where it could have gone either way and we had a rules conflict or something happened in the incident that we didn't have an exact match in protocol, like a key question or instruction, and the dispatcher doesn't take away from the intent of the protocol, but manages that well, give him benefit of the doubt, right? And we talked a lot about some examples of what benefit of the doubt looks like. All right, let's see who's on leaderboard now. Well, we have Jess and Medic Minded still in positions 1 and 2. Next question, number 3. Falls from a standard bed chair or sofa not greater than the patient's height should be considered a blank fall. Ooh, straight up EMD trivia question. Uh-oh, I hear some non-compliance. And survey says 11 out of 11 knew that it's a ground level fall. Yeah, absolutely. It's a ground level fall. But you know, the operative word here, which is in the additional information panel on protocol 17, says standard bed chair or sofa. So what if your emergency dispatcher asks a follow-up question about the height of a bunk bed, as an example? Mom says he fell from the bunk. Would we count that as freelance if they asked about the height of the bed? It's clarification. Absolutely, every day of the week, right? One of the best examples I use is in my service area where I'm from in Newark, New Jersey. We have a lot of fraternities and sorority houses. That's a college town. We got Rutgers University there. And some of those frat houses have bunk beds that are 15 feet high, right? And so we actually have a directive that says anytime we get a dormitory or a fraternity house call and it involves something like this, you need to ask the height of that bed because it's not standard. Therefore, it could be a fall less than 10 feet, or it might actually be a long fall in some cases greater than 10 feet. So we don't penalize the call taker for sort of erring on the side, so long as they don't do it in a leading manner, right? Oh, that's a regular bed, right? Right? Inappropriate clarifier because I led the caller into the answer. Just ask an objective question. How high is that bunk bed? Not a problem. All right. See who's on the leaderboard now. Oh, Jess is rocking the longest streak. So congrats to Jess, who is in number 1, followed still by Medic Minded. Number 4, we'll move along. Not telling a caller to leave a building filling with smoke because that particular post-dispatch instruction is not yet on the screen in EFD may be an example of what? Interesting. DLS link deviation, freelance, minimum standard of practice, or panel not given. It's 5 seconds on the board. Get your votes in. All right, we had a good diversity on this one. 5 said it was minimum standard of practice, 4 said DLS link deviation, and 2 said panel not given. Well, the most correct answer on here actually is minimum standard of practice. Now, how many of you have seen this in Aqua and have never used it? Raise your hand if you've never used a minimum standard of practice. It should be normal. Most queues have never used that deviation. It's not clearly defined. It's sort of out there and we're like, well, I don't know what that is. I guess if they really screw up, I just check that box, right? And you're almost right. That's the way that I explain it, right? Minimum standard of practice is something that happens in a call where it's a critical error that we can't capture in another category, right? And so this is a great example of something like that, right? The caller is in a building that's filling up with smoke. The call taker knows we have an instruction. They're trained in EFD. They know smoke in the building, get out of the building. They need to pause and they need to give that instruction. It doesn't have to be scripted or verbatim, right? Get out of the building, right? And if they don't do that, then that could be an example of minimum standard of practice because our core function is safety. Keep the caller, keep the bystander safe, keep responders safe. And call takers should know better. This is the same thing as when you're in case entry in medical and you hear the caller. Let's take an example of a seizure call. You hear somebody in the background say, quick, get a spoon, put it in her mouth so she doesn't swallow her tongue. And you say nothing to that. And it's clearly heard on the call and clearly heard on the tape. You have a responsibility to stop what you're doing and say, no, don't do that. I might not be where that instruction is at that time, but you know that that's an instruction. And more so, you know that you have an early care instruction toolbar, that yellow target tool on medical and case entry. You can click that on case entry and give anything that's available in there out of the normal sequence. Right? We don't train our dispatchers that they are allowed to do that, and they're absolutely allowed to do that. That's why the target tool on your toolbar is yellow in case entry. As soon as you say, I'm with the patient now, you can give bleeding instructions, seizure instructions, and some very other limited instructions out of the normal sequence to deal with something that is quick to fix, that will calm the caller down, and that will provide good patient care. So that's another example of where we say, oh, a dispatcher might say, oh, I wasn't there in protocol yet. Okay, I understand that. Next time, either use the target tool, early care instruction, stop what you're doing and tell them to don't do that, or tell them to get out of the building, or go ahead and just let them know, don't do that. It's like safety first, right? That's what we teach, and they should know. So this minimum standard of practice is not used often, but in this example, it's not a DLS link deviation. If I'm in key questions or I'm in case entry and EFD and this is happening, I don't have a DLS link at that point. Right? It's also not freelance, and it's not a panel not given because I haven't gotten there yet, right? The whole point is the caller threw me a curveball. I wasn't prepared to deal with them needing to evacuate within the first 30 seconds of that call, right? So I have to make sure that I'm giving some instructions. Even if I don't have them exactly correct, the intent of the instruction is what's important. And as a cue, if I heard this call and I heard my call taker say, ma'am, just go ahead and get out of the building, take the phone with you if you can, so I can keep talking to you and get some information for the fire department. I would absolutely every day of the week be, that was awesome. I would put that in my comments. I would give them credit for it. And I would want to make sure that my staff knew that is acceptable in that circumstance. Life doesn't go to a script or a protocol all the time. We know that. And that's why reasonableness is a topic that we spend a lot of time talking about. I'm going to give them benefit of the doubt. Anyway, that's an example of minimum standard of practice. The last thing I want to say about minimum standard of practice in terms of quality assurance, your agency's quality assurance unit at your RCC can make a directive as well that says, these are the following things that we would support for a minimum standard of practice deviation. And you can have that be within your quality assurance unit. You can then publish that to your staff and say, hey, just so you know, this critical deviation, if you get it, here's the criteria that we're using. There's no test in the standards for it. There's no definition in the standards for it. It's something that the agency's quality assurance unit, when they mesh together and discuss these things, makes a decision on. Does all that make sense? Do we have any questions or comments in the chat? Yeah, we can go with the owl. So we're going to try the owl before I advance the next question. I will turn my. See in for that, but it's there on the screen for those who want the exact scripting. Oh, now I definitely see myself. Okay, next question, number 5. Elevator alarms are handled on which chief complaint? With you. I'm with you.
Wasn't it a lot?
10 seconds.
Oh my God.
All right, we're a little divided on that one. Six and elevator alarms. I'm sorry, elevator incidents. Actually, it is actually that this is a bad question. I have to discount this one. It is handled on elevator. It is 56. I don't know why it comes up miscellaneous. It's not miscellaneous. We don't have a miscellaneous.
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah, it's okay. My bad. I didn't quality assurance my own quiz. We're going to throw this question out. The correct answer is 56. It is an elevator incident. It is not a standard fire alarm. By the way, just a little teaser for what's coming out in our next fire release next month. Have you ever heard of a baby box? Or do you have any fire stations or police stations that have them? Okay, we're getting a baby box alarm in protocol 52 to handle this situation, right? So for those of you who don't know what a baby box alarm is, there is a nationwide effort for abandoned newborns where fire stations and police stations and hospitals and such, they literally have an area where you can drive up and take your unwanted child and put it into a secure box, which then rings an alarm to alert somebody that somebody has deposited a baby that they no longer want to keep. No, it's not for like 5-year-olds and 10-year-olds and teenagers, right? Teenagers, it would be great. They'd have to make that box a little bit bigger. But it's funny because this actually was a proposal for change that came out of the state of Indiana because most of their fire stations have these baby boxes, right? And so while it can ring an alarm inside the firehouse, if there's nobody in the firehouse to hear the alarm, that's now going to come in through central station alarm most likely as a baby box so that somebody can go over and take the kid out. We are running out of suffixes on protocol 52 and fire. You're going to see, we are now going to have only one letter remaining in our alphabet soup for alarms because they've actually added some other alarms in there. So we're wondering if we're ever going to get to a double suffix. That's never been done before, so we'll see. All right, let's see. This one I said I was going to discount, so I won't even look at the leaderboard. And we'll go on to question number 6. Naloxone is an antidote for heroin and narcotic pain medications, including all of the following except. Ten seconds left. Naloxone is an antidote for heroin and narcotic pain medications, including all of the following except. Right, the correct answer is cocaine. Percocet, codeine, and Dilaudid are all acceptable for use of Dilaudid. So on the quality assurance side, right, if your emergency dispatcher did not know what drug the patient took, is it correct to ask? Can we ask? If they just say she overdosed, and I'm wondering, should I use the Echo Fast Track for narcotic opioid arrest? Would it be okay to ask at that point? Sure, absolutely. Right, you're on case entry. We have an Echo Fast Track for this reason: early care, early Narcan or naloxone. Right? How many times does the caller actually say the word heroin or fentanyl in the tell me exactly what happened answer? I need. Most of the time, even knowing that it's an overdose is a challenge because they don't want to be forthright with us, right? So yes, it's going to be a key question in the sequence later if I went to protocol 23 for overdose. But again, let's put on our quality assurance hat. I'm in case entry. I have Echo Fast Tracks. One of them, again, is for heroin and opiate overdose arrest. If I know that the patient's not breathing and it's heroin or fentanyl related, I want to use that fast track. And I want to encourage my dispatcher to ask a clarifying question so that we can use that fast track and get Narcan on board as quickly as possible. Right? And so sometimes one of the unintended consequences of quality assurance is we create an environment in which we discourage critical thinking to our dispatchers. And we have to back away from that. And in the last 2 or 3 sessions that I've done this, you've seen me go through and start telling you how we need to back down from that. We have standards, we have rules, but we also have to encourage call takers, whatever we're calling them, emergency dispatchers, to get the information that we need and to have good situational awareness. Overdoses in medical is a wonderful example of that. We want to encourage them not to be freelancing or overly curious, but if I have a 14-year-old male, unresponsive and barely breathing, do I want to know why that happened? Of course I do. Did he drown? Did he overdose? Is this a traumatic event? Is it a suicide? Is he a diabetic? Right? And so when we don't get a solid answer to tell me exactly what happened, we need to encourage our dispatchers to probe using an approved clarification. Tell me more about what happened. Why is he unconscious? What happened? If you're not getting a good story, you need to be encouraging that, because if you're not, what we end up having is what is the situation now in a lot of centers. We find a ton of overdose arrests in Protocol 31. Does that make sense? Absolutely. Because people are like, oh, it's unconscious, I'm going to 31, let's call it a day. No. Anytime a caller says that someone's collapsed or they're unresponsive or they're unconscious and they don't tell you the why, call taker needs to stop in their tracks and say, I understand he's unresponsive. This is important. Tell me exactly how this happened. That's a good clarifier. I used to tell me exactly what happened, maybe. I didn't get a good response. The caller doesn't know I want the story. They just want to tell me what. Again, that's an unintended consequence of quality assurance, is that over the years when we used to, sort of mark things, oh, that's a freelance, that's down that critical thinking element. And now we're playing catch up to say, it's okay to do that a lot more than we thought.
Again, people just don't want to be honest. So I feel like I understand you should clarify in case entry, but could there be something in 31 that says, could this be an overdose?
That's a great idea.
You know what I mean? Because I've had people ask and they're like, I don't know, I just walked in, I don't know, and then you get to 31 and then you're doing CPR and then they say something and you're like, what the heck happened, and you find it's an overdose. Sometimes they're just not as willing to tell you or don't know exactly at the moment and then see something or.
So I love that idea. I think it would be a great proposal for change for Protocol 31. I think it would even be a great application to Protocol 9 in some circumstances, if you don't know, right? Because it's a safety issue as well.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Because you'd be sending law enforcement too.
Yep.
When you may not be.
I would say overall, I like it better in case entry personally, because that helps me to choose 31 over something different. Like Protocol 8, let's not forget about Protocol 8. There could be a hazardous materials incident involved in this situation where you have an unresponsive. You want to try to clarify before you navigate. It's okay, we can shunt every day of the weekend. We can have an automatic shunt, we can shunt manually from 31, right? But before I get to 31, I really do want to know, why am I going to 31? Is there something more to the story? And we know, despite most states having these shield laws against somebody reporting an overdose, people don't know about that stuff. And they still worry, oh, they might say that, but they're going to come after me, or they're going to arrest him when he, and that's really unfortunate, because these patients are missing the care that they need and that we can help provide in the 911 environment, right? Remember, we're the first responders. That first 3, 5, 7, 9 minutes of the call before anybody gets on scene, we are that first responder. If we can get Narcan on board, if we can get rescue breathing and or compressions, depending on the circumstance, those are huge wins for us. All right. See who's on our lead board. We've got Monique and Laura almost tied for first and second place. Question 7. All of the following are special definitions except large floodwater, small floodwater, quicksand, and swift water. Twenty seconds. Ten out of 10 said quicksand is not a special definition, and you're right. I made it up. There's nothing for quicksand. Do we have any quicksand in the state of Maine? I don't know. Probably not. But,
Yeah.
it's just a regular, it's there. We don't have to define it. Swift water, large flood water, small flood water, those are all defined in the EFD special definitions. And we've still got Monique and Laura in competition for 1 and 2. Question number 8. A caller reports that his AICD is firing. He has severe chest pain and is very winded. Which is the best chief complaint? Folks, survey says protocol 19 for heart problems, but I knew I was gonna get some takers for chest pain. I thought I might even get 1 or 2 for breathing problems. So let's talk about this, right? Oh, let me get rid of this little thing here. A meeting I can't attend. Okay, so heart problems, right? What's the difference between protocol 10 and protocol 19 primarily? They both deal with the heart. But one is for chest pain, right? And the other one's for what? What's protocol 19 for?
Heart problems.
What's a heart problem?
Pretty much anything here to deal with your heart.
Could be anything with my heart, right? The way I describe it to newer emergency dispatchers through EMD is protocol 19 deals with devices and pulse rates, right? My AICD is firing, my LVAD is shutting down. Oh, that's a bad one. Anybody take an LVAD call? Yeah, those are really bad for our environment. There's nothing we can do really. Their pulse is fast, their pulse is slow. They have a pacemaker problem. They're getting some alarm from a device that's implanted in their body, etc. So when there is a device, we tend to want to go to protocol 19. So here's the thing, right? This scenario, the caller reports his AICD is firing. Okay, it found a rhythm that it needs to fire on. And he has severe chest pain. So sometimes dispatchers get caught between these two camps and they say, oh geez, I'm not really sure what to go. I think I'm just gonna go with chest pain. And I would say, you could go with chest pain, but there is a better protocol for this. And that protocol is 19 because not only is protocol 19 gonna deal with the device and have instructions for it, as well as get you to do a pulse check on that particular patient, but there are 2 questions related to chest pain. There's a chest pain direct question, and there's a cardiac history question in protocol 19. So you're getting the same thing and more in protocol 19 when you use that over protocol 10. The aspirate diagnostic is an option on both sequences, so that washes out, it's equal, right? And so the whole thing is, sometimes I suspect one of the reasons why dispatchers go to protocol 10 over protocol 19 is actually because they don't want to do what? They don't want to do the pulse check. And I'll raise my hand and I'll say, I was in that camp for a while. If I could make it a chest pain, how frustrating can it be to do a pulse check? Right? Think about, for a quick sidebar, think about why we don't even have a pulse check in CPR anymore. You can't get a conscious patient to check their own pulse. How the hell are you gonna get a caller to check a pulse on somebody who's unconscious? Right? So that's a logical step there. But I understand that frustration, and here's where a local directive can come in. Don't spin your wheels on this. I basically have a rule of thumb that you can emulate if you want. I try things twice typically. A tool, a question, an instruction. After twice of going through it, I'm not gonna spin my wheels anymore. I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna move on. So that's why we have things in our tools like unable to complete or unable to assess, right? Give it 2 college tries, be diligent, be respectful to the protocol, but don't waste 5, 6, 7 times doing something that you're getting the same answer over and over. It's really, the pulse check can change the code. We all know it can change the determinant code, but is it going to directly impact patient care for you? It is not, right? It's just It's just to create a different response package for those agencies that might want to send a first responder to that versus not a first responder, or whatever the case might be. So I wouldn't get too hung up on it. So in quality assurance world, right, because I said we're looking at all of these through the lens of QA. If my call taker selected protocol 10 over protocol 19, and to me it's a slam dunk for 19, what could I say to that emergency dispatcher in my feedback, both written and verbal, to educate them without sounding like I'm a Q police officer? Someone give me an example of what you would say to your dispatcher.
Well, like you said, it's mechanical
Perfect.
stuff and the hard devices over.
I love it, right? So be thinking protocol 19 is the device or mechanical.
So I would point out that they're not wrong, right? But that there may be a better option. Because if you tell them they're wrong, they're gonna go to protocol 10 and they're gonna pull up
The priorities of
the heart attack symptoms that specifically say these are equivalent to chest pain and handled on protocol 10, right? So if they say chest pain and somebody goes to protocol 10, I would say they're not wrong, but we also need to consider the AICD, right? That's an extra component that would lead us to protocol 19.
That's right, but protocol 19 is the better choice between the two, right? And so that's an example of a rules conflict, right? I see a definition, I see your rule on 10. But we also have a rule that says go to the chief complaint that best addresses the foremost symptom. The foremost symptom here is the AICD firing. In my opinion, you might say, no, maybe it's the chest pain. I could clarify and say, sir, which of those is bothering you the most right now? Is it your chest pain or your AICD firing, right? I could do that. I don't think it's necessary. Can I support this call taker either way? That's the question. Yes, I can. And by the way, let me play devil's advocate for the other side, right, was the protocol 10 camp. I could say, well, Ryan, you could go to protocol 10. I could do that. And I could just click the icon on the top of the toolbar for the pulse check, and I could do the pulse check within protocol 10. And I'd say, you got me there, because yes, you can. That's why all those tools are on the toolbar. You don't have to access them only when they come in sequence of the protocol. A good example of that is a stroke diagnostic. You could be on protocol 26 sick person, and the caller suddenly throws in, when you ask the pain question, that they're slurring their speech, and you're like, well, maybe should I shunt to 28? Or why don't you do the test to make that decision for you, right? We have to do a better job at showing there are more options than just a linear pathway and a one right and one wrong answer, right? Everything that we present in these workshops is about finding balance, and it's also about giving that benefit of the doubt. So my preference personally is 19, because again, it handles the device and has a separate code. But again, this is something that should come back to your agency, and you should say, do we have a different response if we get a pulse above or below the threshold that's preset for that determinant code? And if you do, you should have a preference to use 19 when both of those things are equal. If you don't, and it makes no difference to your response package as to what's going, maybe you can give the call taker the decision to make that choice. It's all about how you frame the feedback and how you give a reasonable benefit of the doubt in that situation. Make sense? We good? Right. See who's on the leaderboard. We still have Monique in number 1 now, followed very closely by Laura. All right, number 9, 3 more to go. How many suffixes exist for a determinant code indicating a person is trapped in a structure fire?
So we're.
Oh, interesting. You mean there's more than one suffix? Yeah, maybe. 20 seconds. Ten seconds on the clock. Survey says the answer is
Ooh.
2. And 1 person's in that.
Wait, I started a little tired.
What are the 2 suffixes then for entrapment? One is probably the letter T. trapped. Okay, so here's just a bit of trivia for you. If you know you have a structure fire entrapment on case entry, you get a T suffix for trapped. If you don't know on case entry and you discover it in key questions, you get an R suffix. The response is this, the code is different, even though the response may be the same. Because you can't have the same suffixes on case entry fast tracks that you do in key questions. So that's just a little bit of,
Yeah, I knew that.
yeah. So there are only two, right? Why do I bring this up? Well, next month I mentioned we're getting this update to EFD, and I also mentioned it's gonna require you to meet with your fire service and go over a whole lot of new codes and building types and things like that. These are some things I want you to be thinking of if you're gonna be a part of that process in determining what determining codes get mapped to your response packages and to your natures in CAD and your priorities in CAD and your run cards if you're using them. Because if the fire service says, well, how come there's a trapped here on case entry and there's a trapped also down here? What's the difference? There's no difference other than where you discover the event. So they might not want to change the response if they discover it in key questions at all. When you look through some of that information in the change guides and stuff, those are some of the things that the fire service, who's not familiar with what we do, to be honest, most of them have no idea what an EFD is or how it works. They think they do, and they speak on it without ever seeing it, because we love that. But that's where you as Qs, as the keepers of knowledge of protocol, can come in and say, actually, there's actually a reason for that. And it can be the same thing. Sue's on the leaderboard. All right, Jenny is now rocking the longest winning streak, but Monique and Laura are still in 1 and 2.
It's not any more fire.
Second to last question, number 10. Which of the following is not included in Protocol Z for AED support troubleshooting? Shave a hair or chest, pull clothing up around the neck. Usually the picture is on the pads themselves. Or cut off type clothing. How many of you have actually used Protocol Z before in your own call taking? No one in the room has used Protocol
We
Z.
may have, but it's been a long time.
Okay. As Qs, have you ever had a dispatcher use Protocol Z?
We've had a couple, but again, it's been a
Long
long
time,
time.
okay. So the correct answer is cut off tight clothing. We don't have that instruction in the protocol. The 3 that are on the screen, shave a hair and chest, pull clothing up around the neck, and the picture is on the pads, are the 3 ones that are actually in Protocol Z, right? And so here's why I bring this up. AEDs are like everywhere now. You can't like go into a store or a place of business, most likely without seeing one on the wall. So we are now seeing a very high increase in Protocol Z over the past 24 to 36 months. Especially since some states have created grant money for people, businesses and organizations to have more AEDs. And so because of that, it's creating some interesting data for us to see where are the biggest stumbling points in protocol for certain things. Like we know where they are for tourniquet, we know where they are for CPR, but what about AED? Well, not surprisingly to most of us in this room, one of the biggest hurdles about the AED is not getting the darn thing there. It's bearing the chest. And so while we have instructions in the sequence for how to do this, what I want you to be thinking of is sometimes the caller is going to present you with a situation where your call taker is going to have to use some critical thinking and come up with a different way to get this onto the chest, right? Because a super hairy chest, as an example, is not going to be conducive to getting those pads to stick. And while most of those AED kits come with a razor in them, not all of them do, right? And so I'll give you a great example of a call that I heard a few weeks ago. It happened on a construction site. Worker went down, unconscious, agonal breathing. They had an AED from the foreman's trailer. They brought it over. The call taker got stuck at this point, right? And they're like, he is a super hairy guy. They described him like a wolf on this call. Okay, great. Okay. Call taker was like, these pads are never going to stick to this guy. Okay. So he thought outside the box. He said, do you have duct tape there? It's a construction site. They're like, yeah. he instructed them to get duct tape because there was no razor in the kit to remove the hair from the chest. It took an extra 45 or 60 seconds to do. But you know what? This guy is alive because he was early defibrillated effectively, because they were able to remove enough hair to get the pads to stick. So these are the types of things where you're like, oh my goodness, that's not, where's that in the protocol? Where's the duct tape instruction? It's not. But as a Q, I hear this and I'm like, this is fantastic. And maybe this should be a PFC into medical for another alternative, but we don't need to have every possibility in the world spelled out in protocol. It's not going to hurt the patient. He's unresponsive and he's ineffectively breathing, right? He thought outside the box. That's something that I would say we're going to congratulate. We're going to celebrate that with that call taker for thinking outside the box. Notwithstanding the great outcome, I love that the guy survived, but if he hadn't, I would say, hey, you know what? That was a really smart thing to do. And how many of your call takers would think to actually do that? I mean, it's circumstantial. Maybe if they're in the middle of another place of business, there might not be duct tape. But the point is, there was no razor. He thought, I think we should celebrate that, give benefit of the doubt. Technically, by definition, that's a freelance instruction. If I were to give this guy a freelance instruction, he'd have a critical deviation. That call would be 100% fail because he tried to save a life. Again, we've got to take ourselves out of this realm of deviation. It's not in the script. It's not in the script. There's a merit to certain things being in the script, but sometimes we have to give credit where credit is due and be reasonable because they thought outside the box. These are sort of foreign concepts to many of us who have grown up in this environment. Me since 2002, just read the script. I can't tell you how many trainers I had in my formative years in the early 2000s. Just read the script. Just read what's on the screen. Don't think. And I grew up in that and I started to do that and I never liked it. And then when I became a trainer and a Q and I started to see that, wait a minute, you don't have to always just follow the verbatim script. It was an eye-opening experience, right? And so that's why I love being able to share these examples with you, because I want you to take them back to your RCCs and dispatch centers and provide alternatives or give benefit of the doubt whenever we can. Okay, Laura has just taken the lead. All right, last question for the win. Which law says that more people are killed by smoke than flames? Is it first law of smoke, Ampum's law, Ohm's law, or first law of fire fatalities?
Totally guess along.
Might be a little bit of guesswork on it. $15 seconds. All right, 4 of you knew that that is the first law of smoke. There's no such thing as Ampum's law. I made that up. Ohm's law is something in electrical engineering that I don't even understand, and there is no law, first law of fire fatalities, but it sounded good.
Well, there should be.
All right, so let's see who won our little quiz. Oh, well, I guess we got Laura in number 1 with 770 points.
Good job, Laura.
We've got confetti here on the screen, sometimes fireworks. All right, so great job to Laura. Part 1 is now over. We're warmed up, right? We will be taking a break, probably about 15 after, quarter after. Is that all right? Take a little bit halfway through. Sure. All right, perfect. So we are done with the interactive part for now. Oops, I might have to represent my screen here. Give me a second.
That's what I'm, no kidding. Why were you late yesterday?
It was horrible.
I know it was.
No.
I see you got a Starbucks coffee.
She drank hers on the way here. It was driving.
Fast.
So I'm not able to add my sound here, but try to make this work. Okay, can everyone still see my screen okay? On the virtual side?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so definitely have some newer folks in my room today, as well as in the virtual land. So this again is about me. I'm Ryan Cayazzo. I work for Priority Dispatch. I am a implementations project manager. I manage the 6 states that you see below. Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Maine, okay, and Ontario, province of Ontario, which the entire province is going through protocols within the next 3 to 5 years, and I'm knee deep in all of that. So been a call taker and been in emergency services for the past 21 years. And my passion is quality assurance and making sure that agencies are using the protocol to the best of their ability. So you notice that the state of Maine is first on my list. I am your representative for all things related to protocol and quality assurance. My contact info is on here. I'm going to have Kyle send out the PowerPoint to you after we're done today so that you have my information. Please reach out to me if you're having questions or concerns, or you just want to chat about anything. Your account rep is John Brisovich. I put his information on there as well, because if you wanted to like buy additional licenses or you want pilot guides, y'all know what pilot guides are?
I do, I just want to know the price.
Okay, so we have something new called pilot guides. First, I'll show this to the online world. Oh, let's look at this to the owl. This is a quality assurance guide on crack. It is a much better alternative to the quality assurance guides that you have, because it's all tabbed. And it has the all the pullouts listed in here as nice. I'll pass this around so you can see it. So we now have these available for medical and police. They'll be available for fire next month as soon as EFD 8.0 comes out. It is version 14. And it is version 14, which is what we're going to be talking about for the rest of today. And so these are licensed for online call taking if your system goes down, or you're training somebody, or you're taking the test, or whatever the case might be. Here's the great thing. So we're still supporting card sets. If your agency still has those old card sets, you'll get new cards for them for version 14. But who wants to carry around a card set?
Them now.
What's that?
Agencies are getting them now, the state of Maine,
Perfect.
the card sets.
So if you wanted to get additional though, there's your contact, John Brisovich. If you want to buy your own, you can contact him. They're not cheap, I'll tell you that. I don't make any money off them, but I'm just saying. They're kind of very handy to have, because I don't need to actually have Pro QA on my screen anymore. If I'm traveling, I can just whip this sucker out and everything's in here. The cool thing about it is now, every time that we update protocol, they're going to publish new pilot guides so that you don't have to keep wondering like, oh, this is 13.3, but I only have a card set for 13.0 because we stopped doing the dot versions a long time ago. Everything will just be in a pilot guide, and when you're done with it, you'll toss it and you'll get the new ones. So that's the way that we want things to go. That's what people asked for, and that's what you got. I want to also put out a reminder to the folks in the room that CDE on the online college, we have a number of new things on here. If you're not having your emergency dispatchers do training on the online college, you're missing out. There's a lot of really wonderful modules on here. And this one I just filtered by EFD, because I want to show you there's a lot more EFD than there used to be, because we have a lot more users now in the world. And so if you're not assigning these out, start assigning them out. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, the online college, somebody at your agency has access to the online college. And if they don't, get with me and we'll have to figure out how you get access. Typically it's the queues, right, that assign things out, or training manager. How many of you have been on the online college? Okay, how many of you assign things out to your staff? Okay, cool. All right, excellent. That's great. So there's a lot of really helpful things on here. Has anybody done, for example, the telephone CPR, dispatcher directed CPR training? Okay, cool. That's great. So there's a lot of things in the works coming up as well. You're going to see, for example, when we get to psychiatric later after our break, there is a wonderful module on the psychiatric emergency protocol updates that came out explaining why all these changes. Has anybody taken that or signed that out? Okay, so you're going to want to really look at that because it has a lot of valuable information in it. And then next month, we're getting another update to EMD. We're getting finally our first party suicidal pathways. And there's going to be a mandatory 4-hour training though on the college website. There's going to be 4 modules, about an hour long each, before your agency is able to turn on the first party suicidal pre-arrival instructions. They have to certify that they have met all of the training requirements, and then they'll get a license key to activate that particular protocol. It's the coolest thing ever. This sucker's been in development for 5 years. We now have a complete toolkit to deal with somebody who says, I'm gonna kill myself. I'm telling you I'm gonna do it. And up until next month, when we get this officially, we don't really have a way to manage that. What do I say? What do I not say? Do I refer this out? Do I keep them on the line? What do I do? Well, that 4-hour training is gonna tell you exactly what the expectations are. And just like CPR instructions, we now are gonna have panels that will guide you through things to say and not say to that caller until help can get there and take over. So here's an example of the pilot guide, screenshot for those in the virtual world as well. So if you haven't seen these in your RCC yet, you will. It looks like Kyle said that they're getting distributed out.
Not pilot guides.
Oh, not
Card
the card sets, the card sets. But the content will be exactly the same for version 14. Okay. So before we take our first break, I just want to hit through module 1 on here. And then when we come back, we're going to do modules 2 through 6. We're going to talk about exemplaries. We're going to do an overview of MPDS version 14 with a Q lens. We're going to talk about some EMG chief complaint selection rule changes. A lot of changes to our chief complaint selection rules. Prone CPR. What? Prone CPR? Yup, it's here. I'll go through it with you. And then we're going to talk about mental health to close out before lunch today. Okay, so let's talk about why we queue. I always like to get back on the same page when I do these things to remember why we're here and why quality assurance is so important, right? Think about all of the industries on this planet that are highly protocolized. Policies, procedures, directives, this thing's protocol, right? Aviation, the military, etc. They all have something in common, right? And that is bad consequences happen when we don't give people clear direction on how to handle the situation, right? Think about aviation. I'll just talk about that one and move on, right? I came here last night on a plane, right? I sat through the same scripted safety briefing the past 5,000 times that I've flown on United, okay? It's a protocol, it's a script. And sometimes it gets delivered in a natural way. Most of the time, it is not delivered in a natural way. They're going through the motions, right? But you know what? I'm not worried about the safety briefing. I know how to buckle my safety belt. You know what I am worried about? I'm worried about the 2 people in the front. And have they done all their safety checks? Has the pilot and the co-pilot walked around the plane and with the flashlight and the thing and all, right? You're at an airport, you observe things. I like knowing that the pilot looked at the jet engine and looked for hydraulic fluid spills, right? He or she's following a protocol. They have a checklist of things they have to do. And so I don't want a pilot that's sleepy or last in his class and paperwork, that is what it is. No, I want them to go through and make sure everything is good before we taxi down the runway, right? So that's why those industries were similar to that, because we're scripted, we're protocolized, we have lives in the balance too. Usually they're 1 at a time or 2 or 3 at a time. They're not a whole plane full of people at a time. But the sentimentality is the same. It's that when we give people clear direction and we hold them accountable, we reduce risk, right? You'll never hear me use the L word when I talk about why we have protocol. What's the L word? Liability. And yes, liability reduction is one component of a broader subset of risk, right? I don't care about liability personally. What I do care about is risk. And when I say risk, I mean risk to the patient, risk to the bystanders, risk to our public safety responders. If I should shortcut my time with the caller, miscode the call, don't follow protocol, I'm putting so many people at risk of a bad outcome, irrespective of liability. And that's where I like to talk about it, because we shouldn't look, oh, this is just to cover us from a lawsuit. You know what? Nothing is ever going to cover somebody completely from a lawsuit. You're still going to get sued. Your agency is still going to get sued for a bad outcome. But what you can check when you follow protocol and you clock out of your shift, you can feel comfortable and confident knowing, hey, you know what? I did a good job. I followed protocol. Don't bother me on my days off. That's how I used to look at it. Hey, I'm compliant. I don't want to have to write any incident reports or go to any hearings. I did what I needed to do. And for my 21 years of public safety, it served me well. I've never had a situation where I got reprimanded or called on for an action that I went, because I followed protocol, at least in my later years. So remember why we queue, right? Why do we queue? We want to catch dispatchers doing it right. That is literally a question from the QA quality assurance EMDQ, EFDQ test, and I use it every time. But it used to be, which switch are we gonna get in this witch hunt? Remember, how many people remember that question being on the Q exam from years ago? They had to take the witch out because somebody complained about it, but it's now catch them doing it right. Provide strengths-based feedback. Woo, that was the whole session we did last time for 3 hours. We talked about what to write, how to write it, what not to write, what not to say. Ensure standards are met. Well, our standards are here. Our standards are here. Okay, by the way, if you want printed materials for stuff, again, contact John Grisovich. We are still making paper materials for everything. If you don't like Vimeo and you don't like digital versions, they'll send you what you want. Okay, educate and inform dispatchers for next time. It's not about what they did wrong today necessarily. It's about, do you understand next time what we expect you to do? Have I given you an alternative that when you have the same situation, you're gonna handle a little bit differently? And for me, maintain dialogue between the floor and the quality assurance unit. You know, before we finish for break, let me just say this. I visit a lot of centers, representing those states and others as they need me. I travel almost every week. And the biggest theme that I see, or the biggest problem in quality assurance, is dispatchers, call takers feel disconnected from their queues. In a lot of places, the queue is no longer active on the floor. They're in a back office, in a basement. They're like nefariously grading calls. I hate the word grading in here. We should be reviewing, right? And they might put information into the incident performance report and give you written feedback. But in a lot of cases, they're not meeting with dispatchers to go over an incident performance report. And if you're one of those agencies that barely meets with your staff, because we don't have the staffing and we don't have the time, make the time. 5 minutes. Everybody can find 5 minutes for a really important call to go over. And just say, hey, we want to talk about this call. Hey, great job doing X, Y, and Z. Next time, try to do it this way because blah, blah, blah. Right? That's the whole point of strengths-based feedback. But I had one woman at an agency, I won't name it, who said, oh, I set up a filter in my Outlook. Every time I get it from the queue, it goes right to delete. I never even know that it comes because I'm tired of the negativity. Oh, wow, right? Well, that's the effect that bad queue or a quality assurance unit that's not well put together has, is there's that disconnect. So find time to meet with your staff. It doesn't have to be every week or every day. At least once a month, make contact, run an incident, a performance report, individual performance report. Show them how well they're doing, show them the areas that they can improve. Have that 5-minute dialogue. I used to say 15, now I'm just like 5 minutes. If you can't say what you need to say in 5 minutes, this is not a good fit, right? Because it's not, unless a call is like extremely complex, these reviews shouldn't take more than that. Show them what's in ProQA, pull up a test call and go through it. All right, are we ready for break? So we'll take till the bottom of the hour. Back there? Yep.
When you pick it.
All right, welcome back.
Yes.
Before we jump back in, any questions or concerns on anything we've gone over thus far? Anything in the chats?
Negative.
Negative. All right, so, right, Q is a part of our life. Think about every time that you eat out at a fast food place or any restaurant for that matter, right? Do we expect anything different in 911 if there are standards for things, right? So here are 2 examples I pulled out. This is the Arby's thing was from this year, right? They had a broken handle on this freezer for years. It came out in the lawsuit. Nobody cared. Nobody did anything. Woman went in to get curly fries, got locked in overnight and froze to death. Right? What standards did that Arby's follow? Probably not a lot, probably violated the franchisee agreement and all of the other things. And then you got a Burger King, 20 violations such that they wanted to shut it down. It was so disgusting. Right? So they have standards, Burger King, McDonald's, all of these places have very high cleanliness standards. But there was no quality assurance unit to be like, are we following the checklists? Are we holding the food at this temperature? Are we making sure that our food is safe for consumption? And sometimes the answer is no. And that's why we like to have health inspections and things like that. That's sort of like a quality assurance check to make sure people are doing the right thing, because As soon as you stop checking on things, what happens to the quality of service? Tends to go down. Oh, they're not watching. Right? The fox is away. And so your dispatchers and call takers are like that too. I mean, the best I can remember back when the queues were on vacation or whatever, oh, because you knew them, they were not gonna queue a lot of calls that week, or whatever. So, yeah. Queue should never be punitive, we all know that, should never be unkind, unfair, unreasonable, or targeted. Some dispatchers feel targeted by queue, oh, it's always my calls that get pulled. Well, if that's the case, they're either working a lot of shifts overtime, which tends to be one of the primary reasons why somebody gets over queued, or you're targeting them intentionally or unintentionally. Maybe they're a new person and you're pulling a higher percentage of their calls. You can do that. It's not pure random at that point, but that's why we have focused cases and random cases. You can focus case somebody. Anybody here put a dispatcher on a performance improvement plan of any sort? Okay, you might want to then pull more of their calls into focus review and do it. That is targeted, but it's not maliciously targeted, right? I want to make sure that I've given them steps to take. How do I know that they're following it? Well, maybe I pull all of their falls for a period of time, or maybe I look at sick person for them for a period of time if that was the issue, right? And do a little bit more that way. But we shouldn't be doing a random import and being like, oh, and you see a name come up and you're like, oh, I'm going to queue more of their calls. That's not fair, right? So we always want to be fair and we want to spread the love. It's okay, by the way, if you're an agency with limited queue resources that does a maximum per dispatcher per week or per month or whatever the case might be. That's fine, right? So long as it's even-handed. So here are some traits of effective queues: positive, informed, reasonable, fair, and supportive. Emphasis on the supportive. We are the keepers of protocol. We're the keepers of quality assurance. It is our responsibility to make sure that we're giving our dispatchers the tools that they need to succeed. And that includes feedback. Feedback is a tool. It's also a method. But we want to make sure that they are understanding what it is that we're saying and why we're saying to do it differently, or just celebrating their work altogether. Here is our guiding principle. We talked about this in the last session in the spring, right? This is from our performance standards now. If the dispatcher's performance is imperfect, but not definitively wrong, the EDQ should give reasonable consideration and seize the teachable moment to provide strength-based feedback. That's the whole point now of our new philosophy, is to say, yep, there are certain things that are going to be definitively wrong. The caller said grandma fell, you went to sick person. Is there anybody in here in this room who disagrees that that is not the correct chief complaint for a fall? Okay, that's a definitive thing. But what happens if grandma fell last night? She got up and she aches today and she has a little bit of pain. She's got some chest pain maybe. Or maybe she has pain in her left side. Can we say that that's a fall at that point? Should we go to fall at that point? Rhetorical question. It depends on the circumstances. If I can support that and understand why the telecommunicator chose the pathway that they did, and it's not definitively wrong, I want to give them that benefit of the doubt, right? Obviously, in my scenario, chest pain is probably going to trump the fall that happened last night. But every circumstance is different. You ever get those calls? You got a motor vehicle accident and the airbag came out and suddenly they've got chest pain, right? We now have a rule in there that says when the chest pain is a result of trauma, go to protocol 30. You're going to see that coming up. We don't want you to go to a medical chest pain when the chest pain resulted from trauma. But for years and years, we kept saying chest pain, protocol 10, every time they say chest pain. It's not clinically correct, right? And sometimes we're a little bit, the academy is a slow moving ship to fix some of those things. But the medical side didn't know that that was even an issue until the quality assurance side was like, hey, we're having these issues. You got to give us a rule and a clear direction because we've got dispatchers going all sorts of different ways. So once we give them the knowledge and we give them some wiggle room to say, hey, I understand why you went to this chief complaint. It's not definitively wrong. Then we should be giving a lot of benefit of the doubt, way more than we're currently giving, right? A lot of things can happen. So with that as our sort of philosophy, I want to move into something about exemplaries. 99% of cases in Aqua universally have never received an exemplary designation. And you might be from an agency or RSAC that has mostly compliant and high compliant cases in both disciplines, and that's fantastic. But think about when was the last time that you even looked at what exemplary meant and gave that to one of your staff members, right? Exemplary is an option in Aqua that's available for every compliant and high compliant case. And yet people still are not using it. And we've had it for 6 years now. Right, so that's why I want to talk about this, is we want to push to add some more exemplaries in, celebrate the telecommunicator, right? The case need not be phenomenal to qualify for an exemplary. Like I take a poll and I'm like, how many people, what would the criteria be for you to give somebody an exemplary in Aqua on a case? Oh, well, it would have to be this really crazy call, and the call taker would have to have had all these different things happen and do a really excellent job, and bodies everywhere and fire everywhere. What? No, that is not the intent of an exemplary. That's a great example of maybe if the dispatcher handled that really well. So we're not looking for heroic or phenomenal calls. We're looking for calls that went just above and beyond what we would expect from an individual call taker. And maybe that's shift specific, maybe it's call taker specific, maybe it's agency specific, I don't know. But I can tell you, just in my own queuing, right? I've had newer staff that once they conformed to the standard and went outside their comfort zone and did things that were exemplary, I wanted to show them, hey, I'm supporting you. And this is a change and this is great. That encourages your dispatchers to take more of an active role in going above and beyond. Right, so as an example, and I know this is a small screen, I have this on a different screen in smaller chunks. In EFD, you've got a drop down. It's the same as medical, it's just in green. But these are the categories that we have to mark exemplary, and I'm going to talk about a few of those here on this screen. Right, so we've got things like caller management, tone, communication, complex call management, empathy, perception, and insight. And there's a little bit of a description on each one of these things that you can go through. And you should take the time when you review this PowerPoint later on after you get it from Kyle and just say, hey, are there things that are happening in the calls for my center right now that I could have classified under these categories? One of my favorites on this is complex call management. It's the third one from the bottom, right? The ED manages the complexities of a call through effective recognition of multiple problems and challenges and the utilization of all available resources. Right, the ED detects and acts upon information involving changing scene circumstances, patient condition, or changes in condition, etc. Right? So maybe you're taking a call for an assault or an injury, and the telecommunicator has this spidey sense that they're not being told the whole story, and they ask a question, are you safe right now? And the caller says in a very casual voice, no. That call taker picked up on the fact that that caller was dancing around. They didn't want to explain what was happening because somebody who hit them or assaulted them physically or sexually was in the room listening. Right. And so when we have dispatchers that pick up on those things and we get really good outcomes, we need to mark those as exemplaries because that was great picking up on it. You know, protocol's great and scripts are great. But despite all the advances in AI and what we think is coming in AI, it still takes a human to read the room and to read the call and to listen for things that are not said, but how they're said with tone and something doesn't sound right. Maybe it's a child on the phone and you're using perception and insight that, gee, this child is just saying yes to every question I ask. Something is wrong, or they don't understand what I'm asking, and they use perception and insight. So that's one of my favorites. If you have cases in your center that these have come up on, I want you to use that. The one that's used the most is the top one on the screen, and that's just caller management. Right? Maybe the caller is really scared, or maybe they're really upset and annoyed that you're questioning them through the interview process of procuring medical or fire. And the call taker does a really phenomenal job of explaining what they're doing and why they're doing it. Maybe they give some empathy. Maybe they commiserate with the caller on an obvious death call. Right? If they do a really good job managing that caller and turning a negative into a positive, we should be thinking that it's a caller management exemplary. So here's some examples. And I'm going to try to play this audio, but I'm hoping that this is gonna work, so, if it doesn't, I don't know how we're gonna manage this, but, oh, look at that, my knob just came right the heck off. All right, so I'm gonna play this and I'm gonna hope that everyone can hear it in the audience out in the cyberland, but if not, we'll troubleshoot this. So. Whoops. Just gonna get an echo. I'm probably gonna have to play this once for them and once for you because there's not a way to get it, I don't think. So, to my people in the cyber world on Teams, you're not gonna hear it for a minute while I play this for the class. And then I'll try to, you can hear it. Deal? Okay.
Here.
Oh, I see muted now.
You said he was gonna play it for the class first. So we can't type at all.
Audience, so.
I'm on one yeah, it's of the emergency.
80 Union Corners Road,
Can they hear that? Are we getting any?
What town are you in?
80 Union Corners Road,
What town are you in?
Warwick, New York.
Okay, what's the phone number you're calling from?
80, 845.
Can we confirm if anyone's able to hear that?
Try.
Okay.
Tony said,
Thank-
yeah.
Okay, perfect. Whoops, let me go back and I will.
80, 845 544 4710.
What is your name?
Real Roger.
Tell me exactly what happened.
My chicken's on fire. If you can get over here, please, just send the fire department.
I understand. We're gonna get them to dispatch out to that location. Just down the line here with me, okay?
All
Alright, don't hang up. All right, I already got them dispatched, okay? I'm sending the fire department to help you now, stay on the line and tell you exactly what to do next, okay?
Yep, thank you, I appreciate it.
How many floors of stories are there?
Send it quick, there's it's about.
Yeah, they're on their way, Roger. How many floors of stories are there?
3 stories.
Are there any people or animals trapped inside the building?
I have my family here, so just, give me 1 second, I'm gonna hand the phone over to my, stepmom, I'm gonna try to shoot some water at it.
Okay, I don't want you to try to put the fire out if they're, if you get injured, okay?
Thank you.
Which floor is the fire on?
My chimney, the top of my chimney.
Top?
Yep.
Is anyone injured? Is anyone injured?
No, not yet. Here, talk to,
Okay,
talk to the, hello?
hello, all right. Try not to put the fire out, okay? Do not carry anything out that is on fire. Please leave the first arriving emergency vehicle and inform them if any people or animals are inside the structure, okay? If it's safe to do so, just keep all bystanders away from the area. Meet the firefighters in a safe location. Do not approach or enter any hazardous or dangerous areas, okay? The car?
Yeah, in the garage.
All right, I don't want you to, I don't want you to put yourself in any danger, sir, okay?
No, it's not going to.
Danger. All right, I'm gonna let you go now, okay? Help is underway. If anything worsens in any way, call us back and be.
Okay, so are we back on the owl? Okay. Not a huge big of a deal on the front end, but what does this guy do well with this caller?
Jumps ahead to take care of the scene safety.
He jumps ahead to address the scene safety issue, because just like in my example when we started out, the caller's throwing him a curveball. He's not yet even on post dispatch instructions, but he knows that's an instruction that we want to give, because the guy said, I'm gonna get a water sprayer and I'm gonna put it out, right? No, don't do that. Then what happens? Common event, we hate this as dispatchers. He hands the phone to somebody else. Never alive is there a dispatcher who says, I love when that happens. We start all over from the beginning. But what does he do once the relative gets on the phone? He retells him and he says, tell him not to carry out anything, and don't try to put the fire out. And he goes through the thing, right? And then later on again, when the guy wants to take the car out of the garage because the fire is actually spreading at this point, he's like, I don't want you doing this, it's gonna put you in danger, right? Reiterating a post dispatch instruction that already was given. I can tell you, there's a lot of dispatchers who are like, I already told them that. If they didn't listen the first time, I'm not telling them the second time. Do you have dispatchers who will say that? Right? So when I hear this, I'm like, you know what? This dispatcher didn't fall into that trap of the toxicity that we can create through the way that we mark things, because he's like, listen, I want to keep the guy safe. Whether he's using protocol or not, he's trying to keep the guy safe, right? And of course, right, this call comes to my attention because there was a bad outcome. And the fire service was concerned that this individual got badly burned trying to put the fire out, and came to the dispatch center and said, why did your dispatcher not do anything when the caller was trying to put the fire out? They assumed, right? Do your fire services assume things like that on you? You're guilty until proven innocent. Right, from a responder's point of view. I hate to say it because I'm a responder too, but that's what happens, is people assume that we didn't do something. We played that tape back for the fire service. Nothing they could say. He went above and beyond. And then I took it one step further. I said, and chief, we're gonna mark this as exemplary. That really pissed them off. But here's the deal with it, right, is it's not a heroic call, but he does go and do more than the average bear. And I would say, because this call was compliant, did anybody catch deviation in there? At all? Okay, it was a compliant call. There actually was a deviation. I don't remember, there was an imperfect clarifier in there, but okay, big deal, it's still compliant. Mark him exemplary, give him that extra oomph on it. It prints out another little blurb on the bottom of the incident performance report that says exemplary, and you put a little reason why, and you call it a day and you move on. Right, so I'm not saying all of these calls have to be exemplary. I'm just giving you an example of a kind of a run-of-the-mill call where you could start to employ the use of exemplary and start to use it a little bit more. And then when you have the big events that are really well done, then it's like, oh, wow, these are exemplary too. Yes, they're exemplary for different reasons. That's kind of where we want to get. Here's an example of how this prints out. And here is the incident performance report for this dispatcher. It's a little bit hard to read because I screenshotted it. But he was given an exemplary for both caller management and protocol usage, right? Matthew did an excellent job reassuring and explaining what was happening to the caller. Example, early on when the caller said to get them there quickly, Matthew said, I understand, we're going to get them dispatched out to that location. I've already got them dispatched. Matthew also used the caller's name to get his attention and provide continued reassurances that help us coming. Outstanding. And then for protocol use, Matthew kept the caller out of danger by using the instructional sequences in EFD to caution the caller against, I can't read what I've got here because this is blocking my screen, trying to put the fire out. When the caller indicated he was going to attempt to extinguish it himself, and when the caller handed off the call to another person in the house, Matthew reiterated the post-dispatch instruction to reinforce not trying to put it out, right? So it's as simple as it is. So that would be an example of an exemplary. Not a heck of a lot to talk about, but just wanted to give you an example. Here now is an example of an exemplary. I copied and pasted this and made it nicer for communication, right? This first party caller had survived a suicide attempt and called for help. When they were originally too upset to talk, you utilized a creative enhancement by using effective pauses and phrases to encourage the caller to keep talking. When they lost their train of thought, you let them know you were still there to fill the silence. The caller went from barely speaking to pouring out their thoughts and feelings on the line. Anytime we can get a caller to pour those emotions out rather than using that energy to take action to harm themselves is a win. By letting the caller express their feelings and emotions, you let them know that they were not alone and that someone cared. Your compassion surely made a difference, Amanda. You're a lifesaver. So, that's a good example of communication. I got another example for you for complex caller management. Check this one out. The caller was reporting a patient had overdosed and someone had already started CPR. Normally, the EMD would coach the bystanders through proper CPR. However, this caller knew there was Narcan at a nearby location. It was not appropriate to ask the caller to leave their phone with the strangers, so you let them end the call to run for the Narcan, which would have provided the best care to the patient. You used your knowledge of patient care and treatment of an overdose to quickly determine the highest priority for helping the patient. Outstanding work, thinking and acting quickly to decide the best choice of action. Right, so here was something unusual, right? We don't normally end a call, but CPR was already in progress. The call taker felt comfortable with the care that was being provided and would rather have got Narcan on board in this area than to have the caller further validate that CPR was going. I mean, it's not a perfect situation, but if you can look to something like that and support the reason why we did something and it makes sense, then we probably should give benefit of the doubt. And we want to recognize that situation and give them a little bit of kudos for tackling that situation. There's another one for caller management. The caller was irritated from the start after being on hold and was reporting a patient laying on the sidewalk with difficulty breathing. The caller continued to become more agitated throughout the call. However, you focused on putting the patient's care first. Well done. While it would have been easy to get frustrated and snap back at the caller, you ignored their rude remarks and did your best to get them to help the patient. When the caller was more focused on insulting the response and complaining about being on hold, you truly put the patient's care first. The caller struggled with basic tasks such as asking the patient for their age, but you let the insults fly right by and stayed focused on gathering the necessary information to provide the best care to the patient. Keep up the outstanding service to your community. Keep up the stellar work, Bryson. Okay, so notice we always recommend using the telecommunicator's name in positive comments to sort of reinforce the concepts here, right? So if you have a telecommunicator that does a phenomenal job managing an irate caller or emotional caller, that's something that you can recognize as exemplary. Some of us take the bait, don't talk to me that way, or we snap back. That was me years ago. Oh, until I had to learn. That's not an effective strategy. And I'm getting in trouble, even though I don't think I should be getting in trouble because I'm just giving it right back. When you're young in dispatch, you don't know how to talk to callers really, right? You learn through getting in trouble, you learn from experience. There's a way to talk to every single caller to not get yourself into any sort of investigation or hot water. That took me an excessively long time to learn, being from Jersey, and we are very blunt about things and we don't like to be told, so, but anyway, the point is, some of us will take the bait, some of us won't when they don't, and we want to remark on it. This is a good example. Then we got this one. This is a really interesting call. This caller, it was disabled and trapped inside her home, which was filling up with smoke. You immediately used the Echo Structure Fire Trapped Fast Track, which resulted in fire getting dispatched in 33 seconds from the time the call came in. You recognize that some of the scripted instructions were not possible because the patient was immobile. Awesome job enhancing protocol instructions in the trapped sequence without changing the intent of those instructions. You got the caller to crawl on her hands and knees to the window, and you modified the PDIs to fit the situation. When she said she couldn't do it, you encouraged her to keep trying. When the caller was coughing and barely audible, you remained calm and kept her calm. You communicated with the fire dispatcher, relaying important patient information so that they could get to her as quickly as possible. Your actions literally helped to save a life as she was about to give up, but you kept her positive and focused on getting to the window. The enhancements to PDIs were excellent, out of the box thinking. Way to go, Shakira. Complex call management, right? We don't have instructions for a disabled person who's trapped in a burning building. Maybe we should, I don't know, but this telecommunicator was like, I'm gonna have to modify this. It's a disabled person, and did a phenomenal job, and the woman got saved on top of it all, right? So these are the things that we can look to and say, hey, you know what? We had post-dispatch instructions. This author of this said the intent wasn't changed. I think that's a really important concept that we also need to accept, right? We said, give everything as scripted, give everything, but they enhanced and the intent wasn't changed. What's the intent of someone trapped in a structure fire?
Get them out safe.
Get them out. Short of saying something completely outlandish, like jump up and down and, crawl up into the attic, or I don't, depending on the circumstance, we need to give a lot of deference back to that telecommunicator. So this one was also exemplary. Do those examples sort of help frame what we're looking for in exemplary? Do you think that you will use more exemplaries now that we've gone through a tiny bit of like what they're for? I hope so. I hope so. I want, if I have one goal in life, and as long as I stay in this, make Q a more positive experience for end users, because it was not for me when I started. And now that I've seen the light and drank the Kool-Aid and whatever, we have a lot of things that we can do to support our telecommunicators. Questions, comments, anything on the chat? Got enough candy and water? Candy. All right, we're going to move into our last hour talking about the MPDS version 14 highlights. I do want to say this is a high-level overview. I said earlier, you guys are the keepers of protocol. I truly believe that. People come to Q for the answers. So I want to start discussing some of these things. A lot of you are on version 14. Some of you are still on 13. That's okay. By next April, everybody will have to be on version 14. I know that Maine EMS is working with their medical direction to get all of the special definitions and jurisdictional things out to you. Is that right, Melissa? The requirements of version 14?
Yes.
Yes.
Medical director.
Medical director authorization. Yeah. Okay, right. So that's really going to help give you a framework, right? So we want you to be knowledgeable. In case you didn't know, MPDS version 14 replaces 13.0, 13.1, 13.2, and 13.3. Thank God, because we were having to teach 13 in the classroom, and then we left it to you to teach the .1, .2, .3. And it was ridiculous. So now we're like, nope, we're evening the playing field. Version 14, they know everything in 13, 1, 2, and 3, except those things that have been changed or removed. Relatively speaking, version 14 is not a heavy update. We consider it to be a light update. In fact, in my 21 years, it's the lightest update we've ever gotten for a whole version number. And there are a lot of reasons why we went to version 14 in April. They were sort of administrative reasons, because we had an instructor recertification workshop this summer. we didn't want to keep training them on the old stuff. So there was like, let's get this out so we can get rid of 13.1.2.3, knowing we're not 100%, we're gonna get a 14.1 like everyone else, right? But agencies have to update by April of next year. Again, the EFD major new release coming next month, and I'll do a dedicated session on that remotely sometime either before the end of the year or early next year. All right, so documents you need to review, and this is really more for the state. There's release notes, there's a response configuration, a medical director authorization, and a jurisdictional question form. What's a jurisdictional question? The heck is that?
On fire protocols, it's like small fire, large fire, like you define it locally.
Guess what? We have them in medical now. With for 14. So those decisions probably gonna be made at the state level, I'm assuming. But we have purple questions now. In a limited capacity, and I'll tell you what. This opens the door, because we did it for psychiatric. We have 3 questions now that can be removed from the sequence. But that opening the door in medical was a huge evolution for our medical folks, because typically that's reserved for police protocol and fire protocol. And now we're introducing it, so, big concept there. Anybody notice the lobster on here? This PowerPoint came with predetermined icons, but I thought we needed a lobster for me. Okay, so, just so as an example, so that you know what happens in the background. The medical director has forms they have to fill out, and they have to go over the jurisdictional questions. Here's the jurisdictional question form, by the way. These are all the purple questions that the medical director or state can turn off in the background. And this is just about how the protocol is going to get used in the admin. These are longer forms. I'm just showing you what they look like. I want you to know that we don't just like give the protocol out and be like, oh, have at it, do whatever you want. There's a structure to updating protocol. And so now what's different than in the past is that every update, we are going to require the medical director to review what's already been established, make any changes that they want, and then see what's new as well. So those are examples of what they're doing in the background. Here's an example of some release notes. How many of you on ProQA have ever clicked on the release notes icon on your ProQA home screen? Okay, perfect. So that's what these are. We now give every end user access to release notes because we know some agencies never give those to their dispatchers. That's terrible. You should know what's changed. You should be trained on what's changed. But in the event that they're not, we want to still be able to give them the same access that administrators have, because there's nothing secret in here. It's just how the program operates. You should know a little bit about that and be curious about it. Also, the response configuration. Version 14 requires a new response configuration. So if you're one of those RCCs where you've mapped all of our determinant codes in fire and medical to your CAD natures and priorities and run cards and whatever, you're going to have to review that information as an agency before updating, because there's new codes and there's code changes. So you're going to want to have to go through that exercise as well. So there's 5 areas of change with version 14 that we're going to talk about this in our remaining hour. And they are revised chief complaint selection rules, major changes to the questioning and management of psychiatric and mental health callers, new determinant codes, new key questions, new navigation, new pick lists. We've got major addition to CPR pre-arrival sequence to prone CPR, the concept of functionally alert and first party stroke diagnostic on chief complaint 18 and 28. First party stroke diagnostic. Yep. Got it. So we're gonna go over those and just kind of jump in. So I'm gonna play another piece of audio, just sort of jump off the conversation here. And I'd like you to take a listen. Now I think I can just, seemed like the second time I worked it, everyone could hear it. So I'm just gonna play it as normal. And I would like you to listen to this call and figure out in your head what's going on and what you would do as the telecommunicator. And we're going to talk about the Q end of it in a second. It's not a long call. Here we go.
911, what's the emergency?
Yes, I need an ambulance to the 81 motel in El Reno,
Okay, what room number?
124.
There's a hotel one?
It's 81 motel.
Okay, I'm sorry. What was the room number one more time?
One twenty-four.
124.
Yes, sir.
We have ones on Highway 81, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Tell me exactly what happened. Yes.
Well, it's my boyfriend. He has amputated, several months ago. But he has got, it's infected. It's sore. I think it's really bad.
And what do you have?
He's in a lot of- he had part of his, he had his toes and part of his foot amputated.
Sorry.
It's his right foot. And he's got 3 different holes in it now. And, he's not making sense when he talks, and he's in a lot of pain. His stomach's hurting, and he's just not making a lot of sense. He's been running fever.
Are you with the patient now?
Yes,
How old is the patient?
he's 57. So they're coming.
Is he awake?
Yes,
Is he breathing?
yeah, he's breathing.
Is he responding normally?
He's kind of talking out of his head, but he is responding.
Is he breathing
He's
normally?
hurting some. Yeah, just real fast because of the pain, because he's in so much pain.
Okay. Is he bleeding or vomiting blood?
And no, his foot it's drained.
Okay. Does he have any pain?
Yes, a lot of pain. He's having pains in his stomach too.
Okay.
His whole body hurts, but his stomach, he's really complained a lot about his stomach.
Okay, that's about as much as we need to listen to. Let's talk about this call for a second. First of all, do we agree that this is a sick person or not? Is this 26 or should this be something else? What do you think? Now we're the queue.
I think so.
26th of May. Nothing in the caller statement indicated anything but a sick person. Okay. And then we get through case entry, we get to key question 1. You're responding normally. But what does the caller say to that question? He's talking out of his head, but what else does she say?
Says, yeah,
He said, yes.
he's already twice said.
She's
Thinks that.
yes,
No.
excellent, right? She's saying yes, but she's qualifying the answer. He's talking out of his head. Right? And so if the call taker puts yes as an answer, what do we think about that as cues? Is it a yes answer? Is it a no answer? Is it a something else answer? Right? Because let's look at our pick list. Here's what he's looking at.
She said something in the beginning, and I can't remember what the exact wording was.
So
Back when she said something about the wound, and she mentioned it, because
yeah,
I can't.
she uses another synonym for altered, but yeah, it's not one of the ones on the list though.
Okay.
That's the point, right? It's not on the list. So I'm looking at this list. Let's go back to the call taker. You're the call taker now. You're looking at this list. She says, yeah, but he's talking out of his head. So what is the answer to this question? This is a deceptively complex question. Well, let's do it this way. How many of you would be like, dude, she said yes, I'm going with yes. Okay, I'm glad we don't have anybody who's in that camp, but I will tell you, there's a lot of places out there where they're like, oh, she said yes, it's yes. Is it no? You wouldn't mark it wrong. Excellent. Yeah, excellent. I love that. I wouldn't mark it wrong either, right? Because it's not a definitive yes, right? And typically we say anything other than a definitive yes on a question like this is a no, except for one thing, right? We have a bunch of other options in here. They're all synonyms for altered level of consciousness, right? Everything from combative down through won't respond. Those 17 items equals altered level of consciousness, which What's the difference in the coding between a no answer to the alert question and an altered level of consciousness? One is one's a delta, and what's the other one? It's a Charlie. Yes, a 26 Charlie 1, sick person altered level of consciousness versus 26 delta 1, sick person not alert. So why am I dwelling on this? Well, this is a really common problem that we run into in the Q world in medical. We are looking for a yes and no question on almost everything in Pro QA Fire and medical. With some exceptions, we're looking for something to type into the box. But typically, we love yes and no because it's easy. Oh, they said yes, they said no. I put it in, I move on to the next thing. So some of you have been doing this, may remember once upon a time, we didn't even have this other pick list. It was yes, no, and unknown. Right, but they put these synonyms in here because we're looking for stuff that late callers tend to say other than yes or no. And these 17 things do a great job of encapsulating all the variations in North American English for a patient who's altered level, but I don't see talking out his head on the list. Do you see it there? Right? And so we run into this issue where we have this sort of like heartburn in Q world, like, well, I could make an argument and I could say, well, all of these things talking out of their head probably was meant, but they didn't include it. I don't know. I don't know that for a fact. I'm guessing now. And I could say, you know what, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. And I'm going to call it a day. And I'm going to say, if they chose one of those things, I'm okay with it. If they went with no, I'm okay with it. We can talk about it. And we can see if we can see what's what. If you were giving feedback, okay, to this call taker, what would you say if they selected one of the answers on the pick list that wasn't there but wasn't a no answer? What could you tell them? Anybody in the chat got anything?
Great job recognizing that it was something other than yes and
Okay, I like that.
thinking.
Great job recognizing something other than a yes. There's something more basic that I'm looking for that's staring us in the face that you might have been thinking about, but maybe you haven't said. What am I thinking of that's staring me right in the face?
There's a lot of options on drop downs. It's important. to-
Completely alert.
I have a clarifier built into this question. Now, some of you don't know this version yet. You still have to completely alert before we're responding normally in parentheses. How many of you have an agency where you don't have this version yet? Okay, that's good, because it's been out a while. It's not new to 14. It was actually in 13.3. But the deal is, when you get a shady answer to the first part, try the second part and see what you get. Although in this case, to me, I can make an argument and say, I didn't need the clarifier because he's obviously not completely alert if he's talking out of his head. I can look at it that way. The bottom line is I've now spent, what, 6 minutes talking about this one thing? Benefit of the doubt to the call taker for either a yes or one of the 17 things. Or for recommending, hey, next time, try using the clarifier and see if you get anything else. Although I don't think that that would really be effective in this case, right? And so the takeaway from this is that we are looking to code this call as correctly as possible because there's a clinical significance behind this question. And I know a lot of telecommunicators hate this question. It's on every chief complaint but 2, myself included, because it tends to do what to the coding of the call that we assume. What does it do to a lot of our calls? We put no in and we say to ourselves, what? It's gonna be a delta. And what else? Related to that. Oh, this isn't really a delta. We say that in the same breath because we say, this is gonna require a paramedic, this is gonna respond fire responder, police responder, because it's a delta. And I would say to you, you know what? I agree. We over triage on this question. We're conservative on this question. And there's going to be a reason why in a second that I'm going to show you why we're so conservative on it. But the bottom line is that we don't tell you who to send or how to send them. Remember that. Right? So as an example, you come to the city of Newark where I live and you answer this question no on sick person, 26 Delta 1, that particular code. you are not getting a paramedic ambulance. You're getting a basic life support ambulance. They're going hot, but it's a BLS unit because my agency does data dives and they look at how many times that paramedics got into that code 26 Delta 1 and worked up the patient. It's very tiny because we know we over triage on it. But by the same token, my medical director can isolate cases every single month where a 26 Delta 1 turned into a much more serious issue, which is why BLS goes hot. They always have the ability to request ALS or go and take the patient direct to the hospital. I'm pointing this out to say to you that there's no one size fits all. It depends on your service area. It depends on what resources you dispatch. You at the local level have some ability to determine what resources go, even the state level, to say, nope, 26 Delta 1, that's a hot paramedic response every time. Every state is different, every region is different. The point is, how did the call taking turn out to influence that code? We all agree that the answer cannot be yes. Is it clearly wrong for this answer to be yes in this circumstance? As Q's. Yeah, I think it's clearly wrong. Right, and I might find a Q out there who's like, nah, I'm giving the benefit because she said yes. So here's the thing, right? Q's, we often have a lot of consternation about this particular question, and cases where callers qualify their answers are especially problematic. Think about this. Think about case entry. Really easy example. Is he awake and is he breathing? And you ask the is he breathing? And they say, yeah, but he's gurgling or snoring. They said yes. Can the call taker go in and select yes from that dropdown? Well, they can physically do it. Is it correct? What's the answer that they should have used? Ineffective or agonal? Absolutely, every day of the week, right? But the caller said yes. They qualified their yes answer. This is, it's actually a really big deal that we're seeing a lot of disparity among Qs that are like, oh, but they said yes. But they're contradicting themselves. And they don't know when we say, is she breathing? The caller doesn't know that we're looking for just a baseline yes or no. Then they give us the quality and it's an ineffective trigger term. Then we know to pick ineffective so that we get an echo right out of case entry earlier send point. And the callers don't understand that. Right, so the recording of an accurate answer to this question is critical. The key question can take an alpha to a delta in one question. Rule of thumb is anything other than a definitive yes, no, or unknown is a no, unless they provide one of the 17 symptoms for both of them. It's on that list. So that's the conundrum that we have. Now, we want to encourage emergency dispatchers to clarify anything that's unclear or ambiguous. Be careful of those yes, but answers. And sometimes we can have an unknown. What's an example of an unknown on that question? What would make that an unknown in that scenario?
Not compliant caller, you ask it twice and then move on.
Or
They just don't know. Third-party caller.
they're not there. Let's say that that's the clerk from the hotel calling it in on behalf of the patient. She's not with the patient, right? So what we're saying is also, we have to be attuned to these words in here. If you consider out of their head or out of their ass to be a reasonable equivalent to altered level, that's great. If you don't, select no, and it'll be a delta versus a Charlie. Maybe in your center, a Charlie versus delta, there's no difference or little difference, but that's something that you can talk about at the local level. So now this brings us forward. I'm going to tell you what the outcome of this case was in a second, because he got to the pain question. He can only get to the pain question if the answer to alert is anything other than a no or the 17 items, right? Because that question disappears if it's a delta. Anyway, we have a new concept in 14 called functionally alert. And you're going to see this on the aspirin diagnostic tool. And here's why I'm pointing this out. For years and years and years, we said with the aspirin diagnostic tool, you can't give it to anybody who's not completely alert. And now the science and the literature have changed. And they're saying, well, the risk is outweighed by the benefit. And if they're functionally alert, then we can give them aspirin. So now, of course, we've got to come up with an idea of what the hell is functionally alert. So I'm going to show you what that functionally alert is. Use of the aspirin diagnostic and instruction tool may be considered when a patient reported to be not alert is known to be awake, talking, and responding. That is functionally alert. What's the operative word in here if you've got your Q hat on today about the use of the tool? Is it mandatory? May be considered. So if this telecommunicator gives the aspirin and you have listened to the call and you're certain that the patient is awake and talking, even though they weren't completely alert or they were altered, can we give them benefit? Okay, let's reverse this. Now you're the queue and the call taker did not give the aspirin diagnostic on a severe chest pain. 89-year-old female. She was not completely alert and the call taker just didn't do it. Now what do we do? Do we say you should have done it? Or is there something else? Teaching moment. However, if the call taker didn't feel comfortable giving the aspirin, I'm not going to beat them up for that. That was their decision to make based upon their 2 to 3 minutes with that caller in going through this together. And it's easy enough on a second party caller, but on a first party caller, you don't know their baseline. You don't know if they sound like this every day or whether this is a new condition, right? We don't have the benefit of knowing all of those things about our callers. So the point is, in Q world, we're going to give deference to the call taker if it's a decision that we can support, because the definition is now giving them wiggle room, and it should give them wiggle room. We can't have a one size fits all, always aspirin, never aspirin. There are certain things that are never aspirin, stroke symptoms, under 16, pregnant, etc. Those are clearly outlined in protocol. But here, grandma's 89 and she's not making sense. I just don't feel comfortable giving her aspirin. It's the same thing when we try to give aspirin diagnostic to a patient over the phone and they say, no, I'm not comfortable doing that. Or my doctor said not to take aspirin. Shut that down. Abort out of the tool. When you abort out of the aspirin diagnostic, it asks you, why are you aborting out of me? There's an answer choice in there that fits a lot of different things that we hear. Doctor told me not to take it. Boom. I'm not gonna argue with their doctor, right? We're not forcing it on. But when there's an absence of an objection, we follow through with the aspirin diagnostic tool. So the whole point of this is to say functionally alert is a new concept to us. And we're looking at it in terms of the aspirin diagnostic, but we're also laying a playing field for the future that's about to change with how we manage altered level of consciousness in protocol for every chief complaint. So I want you to be familiar with it, right? Here's where this becomes a Q issue. How does the call taker know on a second party caller if the patient is awake, talking, and responding? The daughter is calling for mom. Mom is 89. Mom had chest pain. I asked the alert question and she was like, not really. I marked no. I now have a non-alert patient, but how do I know if she's functionally alert?
Callers give us a lot more information than we need, and sometimes enough to establish this.
Okay. Let's say the caller doesn't give us anything but what we completely asked for in the key questions.
You asked if she was awake.
Yep, well, we know she's awake, but how do we know about the talking and responding part? Let's say we know about responding because they said mom's not responding. Do we know about the talking part necessarily? So what could we do? Ask. But here's the thing, it's not in the script.
Right, but if you're considering the aspirin diagnostic, it's.
Yeah, I'm saying, we agree. I'm just saying to your call taker, what's confusing is you're telling me that I can ask if mom is talking, but where is that on my screen? And that's the tough conversation that you have to have, is to say, it's not on your screen, but this rule that I'm showing you on here allows you the ability to ask. It's not a freelance for you to say, I just need to know, is mom talking to you right now? Oh yeah, mom's talking. Well, if the other two criteria are met, she's awake and she's responding, even if she's altered, we're good with that aspirin, unless the caller says, I'd rather not do it. Okay, it's up to you. So again, that sort of out of the box thinking, that non-scripted component that we're seeing a lot more of, we're giving deference to the call taker, and then we in turn as Qs have to give them deference for that situation. And if we're looking for 100% consistency, we're going to be disappointed, because you all know your staff to begin with and how they do certain things and handle certain calls and what their trends are and baselines, right? And so the point is that we can give benefit of the doubt, we can be reasonable about it, and it's very situational. right? But I wouldn't mark them for a freelance if they said, well, I just want to make sure, is your mom talking to you right now? That is not a freelance in this context. It might be in another context. I don't know. It depends on the call, right? No two calls are the same. Are we good on functionally alert?
Does functionally alert, it only applies to Aspen right now, so we couldn't apply the same logic to case exit or nothing to eat or drink in a diabetic?
Currently, it's only for the Aspen diagnostic.
Thank you.
Yes. I want to point out something to you again now, because now this is talking about the psychiatric changes that we've got. Look at this question now. Are they responding normally? And we have now added altered level of consciousness to this mix under protocol 25, which, by the way, now has a new title, mental health conditions. Okay. But I'm pointing this out to you to say, we're going to have some challenges with this. What challenge do you think I predict in terms of where altered level of consciousness is handled in protocol? Think about case entry. What are we doing at the end of case entry? We're making a decision about what? Which protocol to choose, right? And to be fair, if the caller just tells me exactly what happened, that mom's not acting right, do I have enough information legitimately to choose a chief complaint? I don't think we do. And so here's where this comes full circle back to tell me exactly what happened. It's to say, well, golly gee, now, we now have added altered level to behavioral health, which makes sense to me. But now I'm going to have to do a better job at clarifying and tell me exactly what happened, because just like my example earlier of unconscious, never being enough information to choose a chief complaint unilaterally. I shouldn't say never, I'll say them the vast majority of the time. It's complicated because I need to know where to go. And if you think about it even more, I said to you earlier, every single chief complaint except 2 of them, the alert question or responding normally question pops up. So you better know or ask why somebody is altered or not alert when you know the case entry, because here's the deal. It might not matter on an eye injury. It might not matter on a traumatic injury or something like that. But it sure as heck is going to matter on 25. Think about the safety components of a psychiatric call, and think about how many times callers dance around not wanting us to know that it's a behavioral health issue because they don't want the police to show up and aggravate the situation or whatever callers think is going to happen. We're now managing that. We're in the hot seat and responsibility for like, well, gee, tell me more about your son, Mrs. Smith. Why is he not acting right? Well, he's bipolar. He's off his meds. Bingo, I got a chief complaint. I got a good chief complaint. It's protocol 25. That's what she said. There's nothing else that lead me to a different chief complaint. It's a safety issue. I want to go to protocol 25 and process it on protocol 25. Get my red scene safety questions. I'm not going to see any scene safety questions on a sick person, right? Because that's a last resort that I go to sick person. So let's get back to this case. That patient on the audio that I played to you, who was in the hotel room with the amputated foot that had 3 holes in it, and he was talking out of his head, and he had a fever, right? And all of that. This patient was in severe septic shock. Upon arrival, EMS placed the patient on oxygen and did find a rapid heartbeat, tachycardia. Patient was agitated, skin was clammy, and the patient was slurring his speech. The patient arrested en route to the hospital and was intubated prior to arriving at the ED. The patient ended up in ICU for 13 days. So why does this matter to us in 911? Why did I bring this call up? Why are we talking about this alert stuff and whatever? Because in this example, he got an alpha out of it. He got an alpha out of this call in a very busy 911 system in Oklahoma. And the call sat for dispatch for a really long time as an alpha. Who's to say whether or not an earlier patient care on scene would have made a difference? I don't know. It's all conjecture. But we tend to look at things like, well, we could have done a better job, right? He might not have arrested in the back of the ambulance. This patient was really sick. But had we known at least that he was altered level, which we did know based upon the caller's answers, it would have gotten assigned a higher priority, and we could have had more interventions in a timely way. The outcome might have still been the same no matter what. But my point is this: what happens in protocol impacts not only responders, but actually impacts your patient care. Coding the call correctly, for which we validate through quality assurance, which is our wheelhouse, is an enormous responsibility that we undertake because we want to serve those in our community, right? And so if we look at, and I know we don't really cover this, but what sepsis is, right? This guy was massively infected. He had bacteria overrunning his body from those open wounds from his partial amputation of his foot, and did not seek medical treatment for a long time until it was almost too late, right? And the girlfriend, I don't know why she didn't call earlier. I don't know, couldn't say the circumstances. But here's the thing, right? There's 4 signs of sepsis that this guy had. And actually, if we include what the paramedics found, we get 3 more on the list: the slurred speech, the clamminess, and the fast heartbeat, right? And so while we're not looking for sepsis through the protocol necessarily, how many of you have gotten calls from a nursing home? Well, tell me exactly what happened. Oh, the patient's septic. If they're calling you and the patient is septic, that's not a bullshit call. Generally, that is a serious call. And for this reason is that these patients can decompensate very rapidly. And so I wanted to just give you a case example of why this matters and why we harp on that question and what the issue is when the caller says, yeah, but, and then we just say yes, and we move it along, right? We're not doing right by our patient when we do that. Questions? Concerns, feedback, anything in the chat? Okay, let's talk about some of our rules. Got some rule changes in protocol 14. The old is on the left, the new is on the right. Again, when you get this PowerPoint, you can look at this more closely. But I want to talk about a few that are new and improved. Our chief complaint selection rules 1 and 2 are brand new and reordered. Well, this one, we've always sort of had this, but rule number 1 is great. A sudden unexplained collapse resulting in unconsciousness, even when reported as a ground level fall, should be considered a medical arrest until proven otherwise. Does anyone remember what the old rule number 1 was forever in medical? Safety. It was scene safety. If the incident involves an element of scene safety, go to the chief complaint that best addresses the safety issue. And that rule still exists, but it's now down in the sequence. It was rule number 1 for a reason. Well, in number crunching and statistical analysis and determining what we need to know most as EMDs, this is now number 1, right? Because what's happening is the caller is giving us confusing information. They're saying, I found him on the ground, or he collapsed. And we take that as meaning, oh, they fell. No. When a caller indicates to you the word collapsed or found on the ground, immediately the call taker's spidey sense should go up, and you could say, that doesn't sound right. Now, sometimes it is just a ground level fall. Other times it is actually a cardiac arrest that we're missing. The caller's not saying the right buzzwords to cue us in, like cardiac arrest, unconscious, barely breathing. We like it when they do that. We have a clear pathway and it's quick. In this case, the word collapse should make everybody uneasy. Rule number 2, when a cardiac arrest appears to be traumatic in nature, choose the chief complaint protocol that best fits scene safety concerns and the mechanism of injury. i.e., if you get a drowning, we don't go to protocol 9. Why? Scene safety. Right? We might be putting the caller in more danger trying to rescue the patient. Now we've created another patient by them going into the water source. Shooting, stabbing, hazardous materials call, assault, scene safety, never protocol 9. Those are traumatic arrests. If you notice the fast track on case entry says non-traumatic, you can't use a medical arrest pathway for a trauma patient. Even if it's a fall, he fell, I can't wake him up, he's barely breathing. That's a 17. We have an arrest code in 17 for that reason, right? Especially on an extreme fall, right? There's could be scene safety elements that we're not capturing if we go to protocol 9 and jump into pre-arrival. So we're now creating risk for the bystanders and the caller for putting things in, right? So this was number 1, is now number 3. Not a big deal. I want you to know the Academy's big push right now is to get more hands on chest by getting call takers, dispatchers, telecommunicators, whatever we're calling them this week, to do a better job of recognizing non-traditional arrest. No one ever calls up and says, my husband's in cardiac arrest. I'd like some help, please. I'd love it if they did. They give us facts, they give us circumstances, and we have to interpret what they mean. I got another great example coming up in a second. Here it is. This is a major change. I want you to look at the old. Remember this one? When the complaint description suggests generalized seizure, go to protocol 12 regardless of consciousness and breathing status. Man, this was pounded into me forever. I never liked it. I used it begrudgingly. How many of you felt awkward about this one? Okay, well, guess what? Here's the updated rule. When the complaint description strongly suggests generalized seizure, go to protocol 12 regardless of consciousness and breathing status. If the scenario is atypical of generalized seizure and is more typical of sudden cardiac arrest, go to protocol 9. I was so excited when I found out this was going to be in version 14 because we've been asking for it for a long time, right? So here's an example of why we have this rule. Caller calls up. Okay, tell me exactly what happened. Well, it's 3 a.m. My husband got up to take a leak and he fell to the ground in the bathroom and I can't wake him up. And I think he's had a seizure. Who says? And right off the bat, is anybody like, I'm not sure about this, right? The scenario doesn't make sense, but she says, I think he's had a seizure. So the call taker goes to protocol 12 and we end up getting sort of stuck in the middle of protocol 12 right before the breathing verification tool because she says the seizure hasn't stopped, but then she says he's not moving. A lot of contradiction in this call. It's a really long call, so I don't have the audio to play today, but here's the bottom line. The caller was actually reporting what? Cardiac arrest. But because she thought it was a seizure, that sort of strong-armed the telecommunicator into saying, well, I have this rule, and correctly went to the rule for protocol 12. And again, like everything else, like I don't know what would have happened if we went to 9 and used a fast track, and we probably would have gotten hands on chest a lot faster than 4.5 minutes, which is how long it took this call taker going through the seizure pathway. So the point is this, right? Brett Patterson from Council of Standards, he's come out and he said, listen, we now have a lot of data because of the data center that we use, right? And First Watch and all the partnerships we have to grab ProQA data from all of our global users. And we now know this is a huge deal. So we're not strong arming you into this. So with the new rule, we can say to a telecommunicator, listen, if you went to protocol 9 because you suspected that this was an atypical event and more like a cardiac arrest, we support you on that. What's the worst that we're going to do? We're going to do CPR on somebody who doesn't need it. Is that a big deal these days? It's not. We do it all. Think about how many times in a week your center might even do CPR on somebody who actually doesn't need it, but we don't know it at the time because I can't see through the phone and I'm not there and I have to go by what they tell me and all the other things in the back of my head. Okay, yeah, right. So we just have to give a little bit more flexibility in that regard. We all know what a generalized seizure is, right? So it shouldn't be that hard. Typically, the way they describe he's shaking or he's definitely having a seizure, he's got a seizure disorder. They tell us that information. Okay, protocol 12 is still valid for all of that. But in those cases where something doesn't sound right to the telecommunicator and or the queue, benefit of the doubt is needed. We good on that? Other changes of note, protocol chief complaint selection 12, if the complaint description involves both chest pain or heart attack symptoms and stroke symptoms, go to protocol 10, but do not utilize the aspirin diagnostic. That's sort of like a reiteration of what's already in the additional information on the aspirin diagnostic, but they want you to go to heart attack or chest pain for that type of situation and just not give the aspirin. Number 15, for dangerous uncontrolled hemorrhage, neck, armpit, or groin, excluding scene safety complaints, go to protocol 21. Right, so I don't know when or where this started. It'd be great to find out how this happened, but somewhere along the line, it got taught that if the patient was injured and was bleeding a lot, you always had to go to traumatic injury. And I think it's because we have the rule that says when the complaint description suggests trauma, go to the trauma chief complaint that best addresses the mechanism of the injury. But here now we're saying, yeah, but if it's uncontrolled neck, armpit, or groin, go to protocol 21. What does protocol 21 have special that protocol 30 does not? Tourniquet, and I can get it from the target tool if I want,
But to be fair, we don't put a tourniquet on next armpits.
Well, but it's still, but we could put it on any dangerous hemorrhage. Yes, you're right. To be fair, you're right. But what else do we have? What else does protocol 21 offer that protocol 30 does not in terms of the classification of the body injury? Think about protocol 30 now. You've got possibly dangerous, and you've got what else? Do I have a dangerous on protocol 30? Who's got the pilot guide out? We have possible and we have not. We don't have dangerous. So protocol 21 is a special protocol in that it handles both medical and trauma events. It's a hybrid. You can go to protocol 21 at any time that you feel, barring a safety issue, that there's a significant dangerous hemorrhage. Related to that, another one on bleeding, which I'm glad we got codified. If the complaint description involves vomit with a coffee ground appearance or unusually dark or black and tar-like fecal matter, go to protocol 21. This is going to reduce the amount of people going to sick person for these things. Those are lower GI and upper GI bleeds. Those are serious. They need to be managed on protocol 21. Okay. Some other changes of note. If the actual type of suicide attempt is determined to be overdose, carbon monoxide, stabbing, or gunshot wound, go to and dispatch from that more specific protocol. So that's a variation of what we have. You're going to see the language has now changed to go to. You're going to see a lot of that kind of verbiage used in the new protocol chief complaint selection rules. Here's another new one for us. If the complaint description involves sickle cell crisis, thalassemia, autonomic dysreflexia, hyperreflexia, or acute adrenal insufficiency / adrenal crisis / Addison's crisis / Addison's disease, go to protocol 26. The protocol 26 has a new determinant code for Addison's disease or adrenal insufficiency. It's at a Charlie level, and it's new to us. We've only had it since, I want to say, the end of last year. So you're going to be seeing that if you don't in the pick list. The caller would have to volunteer to you Addison's disease, adrenal insufficiency, for you to even know that that's the reason for the call. So there's not going to be a lot of, you're not going to be like this when you say, for example, when you say, does he have any pain? And they're like, oh, I'm not really sure. Well, does he have Addison's disease or adrenal insufficiency? No, you're not going to do that, right? Because they have to tell you they have the condition. And you'll probably have no one tell me exactly what happened. My son has Addison's, he's having a flare up, whatever the case might be. My favorite one on here is 23. This used to be under 31, under the additional information. It's now a chief complaint selection rule. For ground level falls caused by fainting or near fainting or dizziness, go to protocol 31. It's now just a chief complaint selection rule. How many of you have struggled with that one with your staff, right? Because we're always sort of biased into protocol 17, but actually protocol 31 serves us down in most cases a lot better. The next one is not a big deal. First party stroke diagnostic tool. So this should all be familiar to you. The only question that's different on first party stroke diagnostic is the first question. Okay, now put one of your hands over your mouth and grin hard. Can you feel both sides of your mouth go up? And then you've got your answer choices down here. Questions 2 and 3 are the same as they are for a second party. So what's going to happen is if you put first party or first party alone on case entry, when this stroke diagnostic pops up, it will default to the first party tab. Okay? It's not a big deal. I don't know why this is considered a major change. We're going to roll with it. So this one is the same as I mentioned. This one is the same phrase. And the last but not least thing we got to talk about is prone CPR. So this is the one that's making everybody uncomfortable, but we're going to talk about it and I'm going to explain a little bit about what we're talking about here. So first of all, I want to make sure everyone knows what we mean by the saying prone, right? A prone position is lying face down on the stomach. Some of your teenagers might look like that today, right? Supine is face up. These are just medical terms that we've incorporated into the protocol. A caller is rarely going to tell you that somebody is prone or supine.
unless they're a medical person calling from a facility, then yes, absolutely, sometimes they're going to tell us that, because they don't know, that's fine. So with the theory that some CPR is preferable over no CPR, a couple of reminders for you. And when you get this PowerPoint, if you want to borrow from this and give this out to your staff, that's fine. Modify it or whatever. The emergency dispatcher should make every attempt in the pre-arrival sequence to get the patient, to get a prone patient positioned for ideal CPR, which is supine, face up. We all know that. That's what we've been drilled into forever, and it works. However, sometimes the caller's efforts fail at getting the patient supine. How many of you have struggled with that over the years? A lot of us, and we get frustrated because there's nothing in the protocol that tells us how to get them face up. Well, now there is. As a last resort, the protocol will direct the caller to perform prone CPR on the patient, which is pumping on the patient's back. So prone CPR is not a new concept. It's been in the literature for over 20 years. I encourage you to Google prone CPR and look at all the different studies, American Heart Association, some other clinical studies out there. There's quite a bit of research to support prone CPR. I'm not going to go into all of it now. We don't have time, but I want you to, if you're curious about it and you think your staff wants to know, show them some of the studies. The challenge that's predicted on prone CPR, though, is that it makes us feel uncomfortable to instruct it. It just doesn't sound right or feel right. But we still want to encourage our emergency dispatchers to follow the pre-arrival instruction prompts. And then we need to have given them a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to case review on that particular call. So as an example, this is prone positioning. And this technique actually started in operating rooms, right? There are lots of people who go in for surgeries like brain surgery. They code on the table. They've been doing prone CPR for a long ass time. Prone positioning is something that's more recent to us, and COVID really put this to the forefront because in a lot of these patients with severe respiratory problems where they're intubated, they are now putting them in a prone position to help them breathe better. There's a whole science and clinical background as to why they're doing this and not face up. And the literature shows that it is more effective than if they're supined in the bed or semi-Fowler's or whatever position that they're in. So when we got COVID, at the height of COVID, when they were looking at this research, it sort of validated that CPR was highly effective in a lot of these patients when they needed CPR. So that made the academy sort of thrust this quicker than I expected it. It was only a talking point 3 years ago, and now it's already in protocol because there is evidence that it works. Okay, so again, in 2010, the American Heart Association actually put out guidelines on this for responders. You can see, right, they're doing CPR on this guy's back. Here they've got the pads on the back and he's about to get CPR. And back then, look what it says, not recommended for public layperson CPR. Well, that screenshot predates COVID when we had a lot more data and that show, yeah, actually even lay people can do this and it's not a big deal. So I want to show you what this pathway looks like. Now, in C2, which should be a familiar panel to all of us in the room, notice something different in the pink area down here with your DLS links. Well, your DLS links now have 2 more than they used to. The first one is unable to move the patient from the bed or the chair. I like that. You used to have to go and click it and then click again, bed or chair. Well, now they've streamlined that. And then what they did is they put this in, unable to roll the patient over on belly/prone. So if you want to say belly versus prone, that's fine too. But they're giving you more options now when you give this statement. So even if you're not bought in that this is a legit cardiac arrest, all we're wanting you to do at this point is get the patient positioned in the pre-CPR sequence, which solves a lot of problems for us, right? Sometimes we don't even have to do CPR. So let me show you how this looks when you click unable to roll the patient. So I've given the instruction, oh, no, he's face down, dispatcher, I can't do anything. So we now have C26, unable to roll patient. And we go through this, right? Listen carefully and I'll tell you exactly what to do next. Kneel on the floor next to him and push his arm straight in against his side. Tell me when you've done that. And then there's a little critical EMD information. If the caller doesn't understand the instructions, then clarify and reassure. This is the part where we have to give quite a bit of difference to the call taker. These instructions are a little bit hard to relay to an excited caller in the non-visual environment. But we may have to repeat them, we may have to rephrase them. Then the next instruction. Now, with both of your arms, reach all the way across to the far side of his body and grab his far shoulder with your closest hand. Then with your other hand on his far side, grab his belt or waistline close to the floor. Okay, do you understand me so far? And this, I like the way that they put this in here, because here's where we're gonna run into our problems. I've now given the instruction, but I want to make sure, do they understand me? This is on par with listen carefully. They're really important parts of protocol that we don't want call takers to just trail off and forget to say. If the caller says yes, I'm going to click yes and go forward. But what if they say no? I want to go through and I want to repeat these instructions. I may have to vary it on the second time I deliver it, which again is okay because I gave it scripted the first time, so that they actually will do the instruction that I've requested them to do. So let's say in a perfect world, they say they understand me. Okay. Now pull him towards you as hard as you can. Don't worry about hurting him. Is he on his back now? Nope, can't do it. Okay, fine. I click on no, and now we go to C27, which is a different version of this, right? Just like bed and chair, we have two different ways to do it. We've now got two ways to do this as well. Let's try this again. Put your knees on the floor and against his ribs. Now with both of your arms, reach, get this out of my way. Reach all the way across to the far side of his body and grab his far shoulder with your hand. Then with your other hand on his far side, grab his belt or waistline closest to the floor. Now pull him forward. Now pull him towards you as hard as you can. Don't worry about hurting him. Let's say we give him a couple seconds to do this, and then we say, is he on his back now? No, I can't do it. We're done. We're not going to try to move the patient anymore. We've already invested a lot of time in those panels to try to get this instruction out. We want the patient face up. We can't get it. Okay, we deal with it. But let's see how we deal with it. So I'm going to click no on this, and I'm going to look at back compressions. This is a new panel, C28. Don't worry, there's another way to do this. Listen carefully, and I'll tell you how to do CPR directly on his back. Place the heel of your hand on his back, right between the shoulder blades and right over where the breastbone would be. Put your other hand on top of that hand. Pump the back hard and fast, at least twice per second and 2 inches deep. Now, this should be looking quite familiar to you. We've substituted the word back where chest was. Not a big deal. So I want to make sure that we also encourage them to use the compressions counter tool to the right-hand side. If you're not using that, you should be using that and pacing the caller 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. But the bottom line here is some CPR is preferable over no CPR, and prone CPR is definitely preferable over no CPR. So that's the deal. This is just it's brand new to us. We've already had a bunch of cases where this has been used across the globe without any issue. But in the surveys that they sent out, the biggest factor for us in Q World is people were just uncomfortable instructing it. And I totally get that, because it's not something that lay people would expect that we're going to tell them to do. So in Q World, if the call taker says something like, well, I know this might sound silly or something like that, I think that's probably okay. If the caller is giving them a reason why they don't want to do it, and say, no, if they troubleshoot it and they enhance the protocol, and they don't take away or say something outlandish, I think we should give them a little bit of latitude there for trying to get the caller to perform something that the caller's like, what the hell are they smoking? Because I guarantee you're going to have that happen on one of these calls where the caller's like, what, are you crazy? I'm not, because they don't understand that this will actually help the patient, because it's relatively new to the lay public. It's relatively new to us in public safety in 911. So it's definitely new to the public. It's going to catch on. It's going to become a familiar thing, but until then, we're sort of like in this trailblazing mode where we're doing things that other people aren't. I even know there's a lot of EMS crews out there that haven't been trained for prone CPR and don't do it. So we're now like jumping ahead in terms of evolving in the standards. That's prone CPR. What do we think?
We've had many cases that we just felt like we've been doing it.
I think it's great for the elderly couple,
Yeah.
the woman who finds her husband and she cannot,
Can't move.
but wants you to do something. And you have nothing to offer.
That's right. And think about it this way too, right? Not only might we have somebody in a bed that can't be moved, they could be face down in the bed. And we can still manage that, even though we want them flat on their back on the floor, and even though we want them face up. So you have more tools now, and that's what we need to let our telecommunicators know. Listen, might make it sound a little bit silly, you might feel uncomfortable with it, but this is another tool in our toolkit to do and help people in the community. And it'll only be a matter of time before you get a save out of it. And then it'll validate, hey, it works. So also let me know if you've gotten one of those calls and you've used this protocol when you update to it. I'd love to know a little bit about that call because it's still relatively new to me. And I've only heard a couple of calls and none of them were for agencies that I've worked with, so. So folks, that is our session. It is exactly noon or 1 minute too. What other feedback do you have for me or questions or anything today?
Couple,
Go.
I have some questions. One thing that's been going around our center, just a question. Changing the medication instruction to include or a list. Is that considered okay, or is that changing the intent of the instruction?
I think if you have a directive, it's fine.
And the other thing we have is, when you're queuing and the dispatcher doesn't actually dispatch the call at the send point, is that an internal like,
Internal.
thing? Okay.
We've got some agencies out there that as soon as they get an address, they're starting units. We've got agencies that dispatch at the send point, and we've got agencies who wait till case closes. We recommend the send point for obvious reasons. If it's a high priority call, it gets an earlier send point, it gets the right information. But ultimately, we can't tell you who to send or how to send them. But operationally, whatever your expectation is for your staff to dispatch, that's what you should hold them to. It's a bigger deal in fire, I think, than it is in medical. But have that conversation with your staff and your command structure. Yeah. Anything else on your mind on Q? Anything in the chat? Quiet group on the chat side, huh?
Yeah.
Okay, so again, you're gonna get this presentation. There are a few more slides on the mental health side that you can look at. I talked about the change in the language and that big change with regard to the altered level of consciousness. Have any of you on Protocol 25, have you seen a question where it says choose the pathway, old way, new way? Okay, right, so does everyone understand what that is and why that's in there? Okay, so if anybody has to leave, that's fine. I know it's noon time. But just maybe I'll talk about that for a second so that there's some knowledge on it.
We have to go to Winslow, I'm researching my instructor, and I'm not really familiar with where I'm going. I don't want to leave, but I know
Okay.
I'm not familiar with where I'm going. And I don't want to make them late.
Why don't you get in touch with me and I can do a Teams call with you or a Google.
I would love that.
Yeah, and that goes for everybody in the room. If you want to get with me on one-on-one or with your group and have a meeting on Zoom or whatever, I'm happy to accommodate that.
And we'll get a copy of this.
You're gonna get a copy of
Here
it.
with the FQ.
Yeah. But I want to show you, there's one question here that I want you to understand what we did. And the rest of it is self-explanatory, but question 9, and this is not always question 9, it depends on the sequence, says send now, end questioning, old P25 way. And then there's don't send, continue questioning the new P25 process. So let me distill this down. Our focus on mental health has completely changed in the past couple of years. We're trying to prevent more unintended officer-involved bad outcomes with mental health callers who don't represent a true risk to bystanders or others. So we're talking about nonviolent and no weapons. If they're violent and weapons, of course, this is going to be a law enforcement call in almost every jurisdiction. That's straightforward. What's not straightforward is behavioral issues that don't pose the same safety risk. And so we now give you the opportunity to do it the way we've always done it, which is to send now and end your questioning. Or we give you the ability to do the longer way and get better intel for your responders. And here are some of the informations that you would get from that. So for example, here's a new question. Does he have a history of mental health conditions? And here's a list of common conditions, not all of them, but a lot of them, okay? And if so, you can specify what that is. So maybe paramedics or police would like to know that patient is schizophrenic. You could type that in the box, okay? Then you got another question. This is our jurisdictional question. This can be turned off in the admin utility. Has he ever had a confrontation with public safety responders? A lot of police agencies like that question. It's not something we always think to ask, right? So if you like that question, you leave it on. If you don't like that question, it could be turned off. And that way you might decide, well, because there's been a run-in, this now gets special treatment or they're going to handle it a certain way. At any rate, it's good intel for your law enforcement and for your EMS responders. Now we've got another question. Has he recently had a change to or stopped taking any prescribed medications? Right. So these types of questions are more thorough than we typically ever got in Protocol 25. But I want you to understand why they're in here. They're in here because nowadays a lot of agencies have alternative response teams other than law enforcement that will go on mental health calls, behavioral health teams with social workers and psychiatrists and psychologists and all sorts of counselors to augment a police traditional response. And we're working with many communities across the United States that are doing this, where police do get dispatched, but police are staged while a mental health team goes in to evaluate. And if they need law enforcement is not visible to the patient, but would be down the street. We're reversing something that forever has been law goes and we stage EMS. It's turned right around a different way. And in places like Portland, Oregon, it has proven to be a very effective method for less confrontations because, let's face it, police, their presence alone can aggravate a situation in terms of someone who's having a mental health crisis. So that's one of the reasons why I want to point out to you that the online training for this and the online college is phenomenal. They'll show you a case study from one of our users of why we have changed the protocol so drastically on Protocol 25. So I encourage you to take that. And then next month, when we update again, and you're going to see information about Protocol 41, which is first party suicidal. That's where we're going. We're now going to be one-stop shop for all of these behavioral health emergencies. And we need telecommunicators to take education and training so that they understand why they're saying what they're saying. So you might have staff who will say, I don't feel comfortable saying, does he have a plan to kill himself? I don't like the word kill. And we're going to teach you, there's a whole reason why we do want you to use the word kill. And so I'll leave that to the training to describe it. We've anticipated all of the resistance we're going to get from users and from callers, and the training, that's why it's 4 hours, is to explain to you how this came to be and who are the people that made it happen. So there's a possibility of 13 or more questions in this sequence if you take the new method. However, what I would say to you is if your agency doesn't use behavioral health response teams and you're still want to just do things the way that you've always done it, we're giving you that ability under the old pathway to continue doing what you're doing. But if you want to take advantage of what the protocol offers, what I say to you is start meeting with your law enforcement and your EMS and try to get on the same page and show them once your protocol is installed, hey, this is what we could do. And do we want to start changing the way that we do things? Have that conversation. That's a great way to put energy back into a stale dispatch steering committee or dispatch review committee, which technically all agencies should have. I know not everyone uses one, but this great conversation to see how protocol has evolved and how operations can then evolve to fit the changes to protocol. And there's really no better area of discussion than Protocol 25. And we've got some new instructions in here, right? Like E, when responders arrive, follow their directions and never approach them with anything in your hands. This will help keep everyone safe, right? We're all about the safety component. We don't want to create more victims or aggravate a situation. So, yeah. That's the deal with Protocol 25. It's a lot more questions in the new pathway, but for a reason. We're just trying to do a better job at managing these. Traditionally, we've treated them all as law calls, and they're patients too. And whether your agency decides to do half and half or police only or stage and whatever, that's up to you. We're just giving you options. If you would like to meet with us, your agency, with like myself and a guy named Darren Judd, who's one of the architects of the new changes. We're always happy to do a one-on-one meeting with you to go over in more detail and look at your operational needs to help you implement this better for what your response capabilities are in your service area. That's why my contact information is here. Use me. Maine is one of my 6 states. And I love working with the agencies up in Maine. So I did all the EFD implementations except for 3. Worked with Jay Jordan Seapump, so not a stranger. All right, so that's it. A little over, but I thought that would be good info.
Thank you, Ryan.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thank you.